What's up, people? We're going to give it a second here as people jump into this. This is the very first Film Hang. Chris, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good, like it's been good doing the podcast. It's been good doing Finding the Frame for, God, is it like a year and a half now, Sweeney? It's been a while, hasn't it? And
yeah,
I think you and I we've been talking about doing this since we started doing the podcast, because we were just like, we talk about film every time we're together. We put a film on in the background usually, and then we'll just chat throughout that film because we've both seen it. And then, it kind of takes up most of our evenings. So this is a better way of just getting it out there. And if people want to listen, great. And if they don't, no problem.
Yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
good.
Yeah, we're super excited. And for those that know me, I'm Brendan Sweeney from Filmmakers Academy. And the goal is just always to find new ways to be able to come to our audience, our member, just to talk about movies. It's one thing to learn about the craft of filmmaking, but also appreciating the art form. Not only does I think it spiritually fill your cup, I also think it does make you a better filmmaker. And we're hoping for these sessions to be very much that. Chris is an amazing cinephile, one of my best friends. And I love when we have these conversations because we do get in the weeds and we talk about structure and we talk about these characters and these filmmakers that are honestly like incredible craftsmen. And not that I feel like, there's so many people also doing this that are equally as great, but hopefully we bring our own perspective that adds to the larger conversation of motion picture film. And if there's anyone that I feel like has a lot to say, it's you, Chris. So I'm super excited that you wanted to be a part of this process and discover cinema. And hopefully to our members that are listening and anyone that's new to this community, we really want this to be a space for you guys to equally get inspired and hopefully learn from these movies. And please fill the comment box up if you have questions, things that we might have even gotten wrong or missed. This is definitely a place where we're also discovering together.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those people who don't know me, I'm Chris Haigh. I host Finding the Frame, which is the podcast that's on Filmmakers Academy, which Brendan passed on to me a bit ago. And then I've been doing other things related to film for quite a while now, maybe the past 10 years. I've been writing taglines for movie posters, which is pretty cool. One of my friends is a graphic designer and he designs a lot of famous movie posters, and he got me involved with his company, and basically I get sent scripts for films that are out in about a year's time. I read them and I try and condense those down into 4 or 5 words to go on posters. So I've been doing that, and then also I've been working on set. I've been working PAing and doing background PA, so I run a lot of the background that are going in the back of famous shots. And I've just finished doing Michael, which is with Antoine Fuqua, and I did Jumanji 3 until recently. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. And it's been fun because the people that I'm working with have worked on a lot of my favorite films. So while I'm on set with them, I get a chance to chat to them and find out really cool things about some of my favorite filmmakers. So one of the guys right now I've just been talking to is actually an AD who worked with Tony Scott on a lot of films. And he's told me some really cool inside information about everything from Crimson Tide right through to Man on Fire and everything like that. So that's given me a little bit of insight because of my excitement over film. And today we really wanted to talk about my favorite film in the world, which is Amadeus. And every week, I think what we'll do is we'll have Brendan, he'll talk about one of his favorite films, and then I'll talk about one of mine, and anything that anybody gets in touch with who can tell us about a film that we might not have seen, which is less likely, but tell us about films that you wanted to talk about. There's all kinds of films out there that we love. We were just talking about Apocalypto before we came live, and how much we loved Apocalypto. And there's lots of people out there who probably haven't seen that film, but it's amazing, and the making of it was crazy. And yeah, that's going to be an episode that we focus on this week.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, there's so many movies. So guys, I see we have a couple of other people in the chat. Tom, Andrew, thanks for hopping in. Yeah, I want to give Chris the time here to dive in because he's put together an awesome presentation, but we're going to cover movies that are old, contemporary. There's going to be so much going on, and we're really looking forward to disclosing what the next movie is going to be at the end of the episode. So Chris, take it away, dude. I know that you've put a lot of time into this puppy.
Yeah, definitely. I used to do teach film studies back in the UK. So I used to do little presentations and stuff, and I found out a load of stuff about Amadeus that I thought was cool. So we'll talk about it. Brendan, you saw it just recently. So, well, again, just recently. I think I've seen it about 20 times, which is about a week of my life dedicated to this one film. So let's dive into it because it's amazing, and yeah, I love it. Let me share my screen with you guys now. Here you go, Brendo. All right, yeah, so here we go. Here's Amadeus, and it's the film hang. It's our take on it, which is going to be really cool. First of all, let's look at the trailer, which is like the old school trailers of the past. I think it came out in like 1987. So like the old school trailers are really cool. This is this one. Let's have a listen to it.
Are we going to appall you with something confidential and disgusting? Let's hope so, because that is what you really like. Unconfessed crimes and buried wickedness. If that is what brings you to us, the prospect of hearing horrors, you shall not go unrewarded. I don't believe the whole city is talking. You hear it all over. What a story! What a scandal! What a comedy! What a tragedy! Incredible! I don't believe it. Oh, they believe it. What horrors have you heard? Tell us. Tell us. Tell us at once. Tell us about Wolfgang. Amadeus. Mozart. Oh, Mozart?
How good is he, this Mozart? He's remarkable. He's an unprincipled, spoiled, conceited rat. I'm a vulgar man. But I assure you, my music is not.
He is divinely inspired. He is arrogant, vulgar, obscene. He creates music for the gods. He is passionate. He burns with fire. He is an angel. He is a devil. He claimed he'd been poisoned. Some said he accused a man. Some said the man was Salieri. Salieri? Salieri. I don't believe it. All the same, could it be possible? Did Salieri do it after all? Did he murder Amadeus? Amadeus, the man, the music, the magic, the madness, the murder, the mystery, the motion picture. Amadeus. Everything you've heard is true.
What an epic film. What an epic way to introduce a film. We don't get trailers like that anymore, Sweeney. You know that.
You obviously, and you really don't get trailers that are like that long, especially.
It pretty much gave away a lot of the stuff, but I think that like you start off the whole film with Salieri kind of confessing that he murdered Mozart, and then you're trying to figure out why. So that's kind of giving away a lot of the game. But I think that what Miloš Forman was trying to do, right, was he thought nobody's coming to watch a movie about Mozart. Classical music isn't rock and roll anymore. We've got a time when it's like what Total Recall out in the same year. Some big films coming out in 1987. And he had to try and cut through all the noise with this movie that's about a classical music composer. So he tried to reframe in this kind of punk rock way. And I think that kind of brings everything out in that trailer. It's like murder, mystery, intrigue, lies, deception, you name it. It's pretty much they've just thrown the whole kitchen sink at that trailer, which I really like.
Oh, 100%. And I feel like Miloš Forman, and I know that you're going to get into this with his life and his own experiences and having to have fled that place where he lived to ultimately come back to Prague to shoot this. A lot of the story of this film is so much found in him as a human being and his own life experience, not as a filmmaker, but as someone who lived through a very specific part of time, which I know you're going to chronicle that, but that's something that I want everyone to keep in mind as Chris takes like beat to beat. He had something larger to say than just the story of Mozart with this film as well. And to the level of like authenticity he always spoke to as a director, not only for this movie, like I highly recommend people going through his filmography and visiting his other work as a director. It's honestly impressive to say the least. And Chris, I don't know if you want to say anything to that, just to kind of
You're totally on it. I mean, like, looking at the time when the film was made, I mean, like, this was the key thing, all right? Miloš Forman, who's this guy here, one of the coolest guys on the planet, like, what a great picture. 1960s, he was making films, right? And he became one of the founders of the Czech New Wave, is what they call it nowadays, right? There were people like Godard from France and all these Truffaut. They were all funding him to try and make sure he kept making films. And basically what happened, Brendan, was in 1963, he made this film called The Fireman's Ball, right? And The Fireman's Ball was basically like a kind of satire on how Czech Republic was being run. And at the time, the Czech Republic was becoming a communist country, right? So it was Soviet, Eastern Bloc, KGB running around arresting people for doing the slightest thing wrong and, you know, saying the bad things about the regime, you know. So he was living in a time when it was difficult in Czech Republic, or rather in Czechoslovakia, not Czech Republic at that time, right? And then what does he decide to do with Amadeus, right? So he leaves the country, in Czech Republic. He goes off, he goes back to, he comes to America and he starts making films over here. One of the films that I think that you'll all know is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and he wins an Oscar for that and he becomes this really great filmmaker. And then he gets hold of Amadeus and it's like he decides, I'm going to film this back in Czechoslovakia, right, back over there. And this is now 1983, and Czechoslovakia at this point was still under Soviet rule. You've still got the KGB running around arresting people, and Miloš Forman's, you know, already kind of been outlawed by the country, been exiled. This is his first time back in about 20 years, you know. And the key thing at this time was this film's being made. The KGB were following him around. In fact, I think it was Twyla Tarp, who was like the choreographer on the film. She said that Miloš was literally escorted to and from set by his old friends, which is basically like the KGB, right? The secret police of Czechoslovakia escorted him to and from set. Now, there's stories about him being handcuffed at points and stuff like that. I don't know how true that is, but certainly the cast and crew were believed that their hotel rooms had been bugged, that everything that they were doing was, you know, pretty much under scrutiny and being watched by the regime. So this is the time now when Miloš Forman has decided to bring an American camera crew, you know, a whole team out to make this film in Czechoslovakia. And the reason he chose Czechoslovakia is pretty simple, really, right? The places looked like they hadn't changed since the 18th century. Like this is Czechoslovakia at the time, right? The buildings hadn't changed since Mozart's times. As you can see, I've written that in the top corner right there. But like, that's how it looked. So if you look at the locations at the time, this is what they look like, right? And in fact, this is modern day at the bottom here, right? In fact, 2016, so 10 years ago. But still, these buildings here, they didn't have to do an awful lot. So it didn't cost an awful lot to shoot. You know, this
and didn't like Miloš want to choose a lot of the same locations that were in like accurate to the story, like the storyline itself in Mozart. Like when playing in Prague, he made sure to use the same like sets and settings.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like for example, let me go through to it. This one here, the Till Theatre in Prague. This is the theatre that was used for Mozart's premiere of Don Giovanni, one of his most famous operas. So Miloš insisted upon filming in the exact same theatre that Mozart would have conducted in. Oh, by the way, it's Mozart's 270th birthday today, so yeah, happy birthday. But but like you have the cool thing where Tom Hulce, who played Mozart in the film, was actually conducting at the exact place where Mozart would have conducted like 200 years, 250 years before. You know what I mean? Which is pretty cool. It did throw up some bad things though, like the Till Theatre, this one here, right? It could, at the time, it could only be lit by candles. So in fact, I think I've got it here. Let me find it. Yeah. So it could only be lit by candles, right? So literally they didn't have any electrics inside. So every shot you see of Mozart conducting in Amadeus is lit by candles. Like that's how they did it, and they couldn't fit like big electric equipment in anyway because it was such small nooks and crannies inside this theatre. It wasn't made to have cameras in it, all right. And that's what makes this location really cool. When you watch it throughout the movie, you'll see it's candlelight. You know, we've actually got pictures, I think, of somebody up there trying to light it. Yeah, you can see it here, right? So it was tough. They had these big globes around and stuff like that, but pretty much every shot being lit by candlelight. Here's the other thing I'll tell you as well, which makes it even cooler. The night that they first shot inside the theatre, right, was July the 4th, 1983, right? Now, when they were doing that, the Czechs who were in there decided that they'd unfurl this massive American flag, right? And everybody stood up and saluted as they sang the national. Like, the American viewers will love this, right? Because you guys love your Land of the Free and all that kind of stuff, and singing at American football games and stuff, right? But literally, the day that they started filming here, they unfurled this massive American flag and sang Stars and Stripes, right? Which is really good. Oh, yeah, the national anthem of America, right? The Star Spangled Banner, that's the one, right? The craziest bit was everybody who stood up was all the extras and everything like this. There were 40 people in the audience still sitting down. And the reason why they were still sitting down is because that was the Czech secret police. They were literally like playing extras in the film so they could keep an eye on the crew and keep an eye on Miloš as well. So, yeah, pretty cool thing that happened during filming there.
And do you know how long this production took to shoot? That was something that I didn't quite get an answer on. Did you ever get a pulse on how long it took to make this film? Because it is intricate. If you haven't watched the movie, and then I want to turn it back to you, but it's like
no, you're good.
The level of detail that is not only in these sets, it's the costume, which I know you're going to spend time talking to. It is a very big film. It reminds me of the same level of something like a Michael Cimino movie, which I know we both love, like The Deer Hunter and Heaven's Gate. But what's interesting, it comes in the 80s at a time where there was a lot of director-driven productions. Like the early 80s, there was a lot of big directors going to bat for these almost spectacle films. We had Martin Scorsese at the beginning of the 80s was doing movies like New York, New York, which was a buck, you know. And then we also had some other big directors. We had Apocalypse Now that obviously came around that time. And this was definitely after One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest. It's very similar to Michael Cimino, where he did The Deer Hunter, won Best Picture, and then doubled down on another movie that was going to even push the needle more. And I know this wasn't the film that he did right after One Flew Over, but you can definitely see he was building towards this movie.
Absolutely. And I think that it took about 6 months to film, apparently. And I think that one of the things that Miloš... Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Miloš had going in his favor, and I'll scroll it back, is right here. It was a play, and it was a famous play at the time. Like, it was doing the rounds on the West End. It was doing the rounds in Broadway, you know. And you had, like, so for example, here, you can actually see. Anybody want to guess who this is? You want to have a guess, Sweeney? Who's the female?
I have no idea.
Jane Seymour, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, a.k.a. Solitaire from Live and Let Die, the Bond film.
That's awesome.
Wild, right? And then this guy, you any ideas on this one?
He's no
playing
idea.
Salieri. Ian McKellen, Gandalf himself, mate. Magneto.
That's insane.
Right there. That's him playing Salieri, right? On stage, prior to being made.
Play doing its rounds.
Sort of in the early 1980s, from 1979 onwards. Yeah. So that's this had chance to build up a big audience, and apparently Miloš went and saw it like multiple times, and then he met with the writer Peter Shaffer, right? And Peter Shaffer was the this guy who, you know, he'd obviously written this. He'd written a few other major plays in the UK. This was his first proper film script, and apparently Miloš took him to this like farmhouse in Connecticut, and they both sat down and were writing, because what Miloš wanted was, he didn't want these sort of stagey kind of things until towards the end. He wanted to have lots more movement and lots more cinematic look. So apparently Peter Shaffer said it was like being confined. You know what I mean? It was like being held in prison, because he had to sit there every day and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And they did it for, you know, weeks on end. And then eventually they had the script, and Miloš took that to the studios and got it made. What a dude, you know? Oh, that's very awesome. Cool. You know, this bit at the beginning, this is a cool location, just telling you now quickly. All right. The mental hospital, which Salieri is kept in from the very early on in the film, right through to the end. And then he gets wheeled through at the very end when he's going amongst everybody going, I absolve you, I absolve you. That's actually a military barracks. And this is what it looked like in Czech Republic. So I think that's pretty cool. And yeah, we see that at the beginning, at the end. The interiors like this, they didn't have to be done up, because they were all still looking.
I was going to say, most of this stuff's pretty turnkey, right? You're talking about stuff that was built that way, that was super ornate.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, like, I think they had 2 stages, or 2 sets that were created on stages. And like, one of them was Mozart's bedroom and house. and that was just one of them. And then the other one was Salieri's room, and that was it. Those were the only 2 sets that they had built. Everything else was shot on location, just like this, which, you know, is pretty cool. And this is the guy who was shooting it, Miroslav Ondříček, who doesn't have a very big sort of filmography. If you type him in on IMDb, Sweeney, I don't think he has an awful lot to his name. I think he did Ragtime. I think he did Haigh.
let me look.
They were 2 other ones that Miloš had credited a name for. But yeah, that was it. And then afterwards, he fades into obscurity. It's like he won the Oscar and then just cleared off, you know, which is, yeah. Give me that, Sweeney, when you find it, because that's a cool thing. Because
I mean, he shot if you've ever seen that.
I've not seen it.
Yeah, If is a really great film with Malcolm McDowell. If is the film that essentially got Malcolm McDowell casted in A Clockwork Orange, because Stanley Kubrick thought that film was so impactful that he was like, this is our protagonist for A Clockwork Orange. So I mean, that's a pretty big film. And quickly going through his filmography, did If, of course, Amadeus, Hair, another Forman film that was very well acclaimed after One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, he has a series of films that I'm not particularly aware of, but I definitely need to spend some time. It seems like Silkwood was something else that he shot, which was directed by Mike Nichols, which is amazing. I don't think, has anyone seen Silkwood? I would love to know if that's a good film. That is a 7.1 on IMDb. So he must have been through the 80s when there was such a surplus of work and people just doing a lot of production in a variety, especially being that a lot of these are American productions. He was probably doing some really cool stuff in his career.
I think he did. Did he do Fireman's Ball as well with Miloš? So that was the film that they both probably got banned from Czechoslovakia on. Did he do Fireman's Ball too?
He did. I don't see that. No, he did a League of Their Own. So just think about that. That's a crazy movie. Yeah, that's awesome.
What a brilliant movie that is, by the way. The way that they deal with the war, the women whose husbands have gone to war, is brilliant. Like when they're being handed those letters and they're all coming out and everything. And also, I think it's one of Tom Hanks's best as well. Even though he's done some, that's a bold claim with everything else. I like him as Carl Hanratty as well for Catch Me If You Can. That's a good movie, mate. We were talking about Spielberg and how we didn't both enjoy The Fablesmans as much, but Catch Me If You Can is one of his best, I think.
I mean, this might be a hot take, and then we can get back to your presentation.
Them,
I thought War Horse, that's my favorite last Spielberg. You know,
you like your War Horse, don't you?
War Horse. I don't know if it's just me, guys. Drop if you like War Horse, but I kind of stand by that movie as being really fucking awesome.
Here's Sweeney and I's where we disagree, and we don't often disagree. We usually have a good agreement, and then when we have to kind of disagree with each other, I think we don't usually talk about a certain subject. But I liked 1917 a lot, and Sweeney didn't, and he thought War Horse dealt with war much better than 1917 did.
I mean, I don't know if War Horse dealt with war better. I just did not. I'm a big fan of World War One, and when it comes to like, all right, a better example of World War One, and maybe it's, you know, it's a bit on the nose for World War One.
All Quiet on the Western Front.
It's a better movie. It is a bit more on the nose for World War One versus 1917, which is showing like a completely different perspective. But since World War One is just a least discussed like a lesser discussed topic in cinema, I really appreciated All Quiet for doubling down on that experience, similar to how Peter Jackson showed that in what was the documentary? They All Grow Old, or I don't think that's exactly.
I think is it 4 Came Back or something like that, or was that the World War II one they did?
Oh,
so like 4 Came Back or 3 Came Back.
Documentary by Peter Jackson, They Shall Not Grow Old, is one of the best depictions because it's real footage of World War One. And Peter Jackson, same director that did The Lord of the Rings, he is an absolute maverick of a filmmaker. And if you haven't watched his documentary work, it doesn't only double down on how great of a filmmaker he is, but how much he just appreciates cinema and to the depth of which he went to recreate what it was like being on the front line as a British infantry soldier during World War One. I remember being in the cinema watching that movie, leaving it and going directly to the box office and buying a ticket and walking back in and sitting for another 2 hours to relive what he put on screen. And to go full circle with why I don't love 1917 so much is, one, I think what Roger Deakins did with that film in the oneer, it really muddled the pacing of the movie for me personally from a character development and also like spatial. There is so much like inconsistency with the space of like going from one sequence to the next and like how time was displayed that I personally didn't love it. And I don't know, it's like, sure, I think the perspective is interesting, but I love what All Quiet did and kind of showing the sheer brutality. And I think Kubrick said it right. If you're going to show war, not that 1917 wasn't brutal. I think it was particularly brutal at some points. I think that All Quiet goes there to show how awful it really was. And They Shall Not Grow Old, I highly recommend it. And to give like a final last like cool parts of that production, like Peter Jackson went to the lengths of finding all of the like artillery, the guns, the cannons, the tools, everything that was on screen, and completely replicating the sound design of what it would have been.
Oh, that's
like
cool.
to all
That's
of that
very
stuff.
cool.
He's a massive World War One buff. He bought
Okay.
all of it, the tanks, all of this shit. I mean, the dude's literally like New Zealand living his best life, you know? But highly
King
recommend.
Kong was good that he did as well. If you,
I love
you know,
dude. Peter Jackson. I
Kong
literally
was
have
great.
I have a signed photo of Peter Jackson on the set of it has to be The Fellowship. And Peter Jackson, to kind of go in the origin story, I guess, of myself and then Chris, I would love to know what what got you to love film. But I remember being in Burger King as a kid, and my dad and we would go to the movies every weekend. And I was like, my dad would be like, what movie do you want to see? And at the time, Lord of the Rings Fellowship just came out. My dad was like, I heard that this is really good. I had no idea what that was. And I remember the experience of watching that movie was the same as like, dude, I mean, you get so high as a kid. One, your dopamine's just insane. And watching a movie, I was in kindergarten when that movie came out, or first grade, around that time, so young. And I remember seeing directed by Peter Jackson. And to this day, I remember that end credit scene, what it was like sitting in that movie theater being like, I loved movies.
Yeah.
The Fellowship literally made me realize that there's nothing better than movies.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law, for this last year for my birthday, he found me a signed photo from Peter Jackson of that on set.
Has it been
It's like,
authenticated? It's full on.
it's authenticated. He got it. He does like auctions and stuff. This dude's like, he lives in that world where he's always trying to find like things that have value. And what's cool is Peter Jackson doesn't really sign autographs that often, to my understanding. So not that I'm ever going to sell it, but I'm like, that's always a reminder of why I love film. And
I'll have
film's
to come
super
around and
important.
steal it. I'm gonna have to
Dude.
come around and take it off your wall.
Yeah. So yeah, to go full circle, love Peter Jackson. I love 1917 for what it is. I don't hate the movie. I just expect a lot from Sam Mendes because I think he's a really brilliant filmmaker. And to those that really love the movie, I can also see why. That's the beauty of cinema. I'm also looking at it from a perspective of being, what would I do? You know, not what Sam Mendes is trying to do, because I also love the subject matter of World War One.
It felt like, just to kind of put a curtail on the 1917 thing, since I brought it up, it did feel like Sam Mendes got a bit sick of the question about it being a oneer, because he thought he just wrote it in there and then it would just kind of be a thing. And they I think that every single movie, even we did it for Look Of, didn't we? Which I remember doing, right? It was all about the oneer, when in fact, the fact that, Roger Deakins can create some of the images that he caught in that movie, whether it was a oneer or not, or whether it was pretending to be a oneer or not, it's brilliant. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's what we should have been looking at, the look of the film, because that flaming bit when he's inside the church is gorgeous. Anyway, yeah. I mean, we'll have to do that. And while we're on Sam Mendes, let's make a note, because I want to do Road to Perdition, because it's one of my favorite movies as well. And that was Conrad Hall.
Guys, drop in the comments what movies you guys want to see us do. Can be old, contemporary, something that's in theaters now. We love watching cinema. And if there's anything that's obscure that you want us to bring to light, drop those and I'll make sure to put that into a spreadsheet.
Yeah. And now back to back to Amadeus. As I was rubbing my nose randomly. This is something pretty cool, which I was looking at, is if you look at the way that Mozart is shot as he goes through the film, something you might have noticed yourselves. He starts off, it's not really, it's all the same theatre where they're shooting all this. It's all the same theatre where they're presenting it as well. And it's this, as I said, this Ely Theatre, or whatever it's called, Till Theatre in Prague, Friendship Theatre, I think it translates as. It slowly gets more cloying and it gets more sickly as Mozart gets sicker. So in the end, for his final performance, you actually see this. You can barely see the back of the hall, and they've made it much more hazy. They've put a lot more must in there. So again, Shane always goes on about this on Filmmakers Academy. Just plugged it there, Sweeney. You can have that one, right? But like Shane always talks about haze and musk and how to use it as a storytelling element, and I think that this does it really well. Well done, Ondříček. You've smashed it. But yeah, as I said, by the end of it, you got looks like this, which is just gorgeous, and certainly changed the way that I viewed the film. Yeah. I don't know why I randomly threw that one in there, but there you've got, again, Miloš Forman's just a dude, and let's be honest, like the films that he's made are absolutely unbelievable, right? And I just love seeing pictures of him on set, because this is a guy who is completely controlled by character. And he used to lecture at Columbia University, actually, Sweeney. He used to do film studies there, right? He actually taught James Mangold, which is a cool story. The guy who did Ford versus Ferrari, and he did Indiana Jones 5, and he did a bunch of amazing films. I think he did Walk the Line, the Johnny Cash one, and he's just done the Bob Dylan story. So Mangold's the guy. And yeah, Miloš Forman was his lecturer at one point.
James Mangold now teaches at Columbia. So I heard about that he was taught underneath Forman and Cristobal, who used to work with us at Filmmakers Academy. If you don't know Cristobal Abugaber, he's a great director. He's actually at Columbia finishing out his thesis, and he was getting taught by James Mangold, and how much he spoke fondly of Forman and his delicacy with characters, especially as you go back and watch these movies. And I even want to go back a couple of slides when you were showing some of those interiors, just because we got to hold on these for a second, especially like that, and then we'll go, I mean, that's even a great one. Or show the one with all the candlelight where it's him and it's really golden, like goldenrod. That's a great one, and we can hold on that. Not only is he really good at understanding characters, he's really good at understanding the perspective of where the camera needs to be to fully represent Mozart as this unbridled bundle of creativity and how the world perceives him, especially as his arc progresses. And like you said, it gets more sickly. There's these really powerful shots where you can see that Mozart has the world around him looking down at him, crafting brilliance. I mean, this guy who died at 35 put out 35, which for that time, I wonder, I know it was still young and it was definitely a shock, but what was like the average range of living? Like
I mean, Salieri lives till he's old, so we know that we've got some age in there. I mean, I'm not saying that it's the paragon of truth and honesty, but yeah, I mean, like you had people living into the 70s, you know what I mean?
Okay, so it was young. Yeah. So, and what was interesting is this guy put out 800 pieces of work in his lifetime as a composer, which in comparison to most other composers, it's like a feat. And kind of going back to what I'm speaking to here is just his sense of composition throughout the film and how much impact Mozart always had on the frame, but not only on the frame, the world that's kind of resting on his shoulders, and what it is to be a composer during a time of royalty as well, and these empirical worlds. And you had someone who could easily reorder society in the way that they meant. And what's interesting about being an artist at this time, while you definitely are higher up in the rung, you're still a pawn in a specific capacity. And Mozart, while he struggled with financials and obviously was a drinker, he was also a pawn to the royalty, or to like the higher powers that be that kind of governed over him. And even being an artist, while it was amazing to be great, that time period, Miloš did a really good job of showing that hierarchy in this world and how much pressure that also put on Mozart, especially as you go into the third act.
I think he probably did that as well, because look at the time that he was filming in, and
Yeah.
look at his life. You know, like I think that we always say that directors put a lot of themselves in their work, and I think right here we're seeing it. You know, Miloš Forman was a Czech artist at the time of Soviet rule. You know what I mean? And at that time, it was like, if any of you haven't seen it, Death of Stalin is a great example, right? They're literally, at the beginning, they're recording the orchestra for Stalin. Like, the whole performance is on because of him. Like, art is for the the people who rule society. It's not for the people. You know what I mean? And that was what Miloš was rebelling against. And in fact, what we're seeing right here with Mozart is he's very punk rock. You'll see, like, later on when I show a few more of the wigs and stuff like that, they wanted Mozart to look like punk rock. They wanted him to be like the David Bowie. They wanted him to be like that kind of, somebody who kind of stuck two fingers up to the establishment. Hang on, it's America. One finger up to the establishment. You know what I mean? Like that. Like this pink wig that we've got him in right here now is entirely there to be punk rock. That's what this guy was all about. And if you look at Salieri, what was I going to say then? Oh yeah, if you look at Salieri, he's got this dark brown wig. You look at his clothing, it's very dark. Everything is dour about and somber about Salieri. Whereas if you look at Mozart, it's floral, it's all these kind of crazy wigs. He's got that crazy laugh, which I'm going to talk about at some point. Now, if you want to talk about it now, that's fine. But like, he's got this crazy laugh, and Miloš Forman really delved into the laugh because he wanted it to be this idea of just absurdity, in the face of really kind of straitjacketed, artistry. You were told to do something German or Italian. Yeah, go on.
And Mozart was known to do that laugh, wasn't he? Like that was actually a real thing. Or what is the story on that? Because I did look at how legitimate is this, and they said that Mozart had a childlike laugh. To what capacity? Maybe not as dramatic as it is in the movie, but I believe that there is, because this movie is not a biopic for anyone that hasn't.
Not realistic.
Yeah, it definitely is meant to play on the times and to speak to a larger theme, but obviously it's dealing with real characters. And like Salieri, he actually gained a renewed interest after this movie came out because he was kind of in obscurity at that point. Not a lot of people listened to him in the classical music space because of obviously Mozart and the other contemporaries of the time. But this film brought him back to kind of, I doubt that he's being listened at nearly the lengths of Mozart, but he was, at least at the time of releasing the movie, a lot more considered. But yeah, it's definitely not meant to be an accurate piece.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Mozart died very poor at the end of his life because of his drinking, so that was certainly a huge thing on it. But yeah, I mean, Peter Shaffer was pretty much doing, he created this whole Mozart Salieri rivalry. And in fact, I think before that it was Pushkin did a short play that was Mozart and Salieri. We don't know that they hated each other, we don't know anything like that. But one thing I'll say is, from creating this movie from that dynamic of Mozart v Salieri, look at what we've seen since. Look at the way that character's been used. I mean, I think it was Christopher Nolan referenced that this was one of his films that he referenced in Oppenheimer. Like when you've got Robert Downey Jr. and Cillian Murphy going off at each other. Literally, it's Mozart and Salieri all over again. You know what I mean? So he definitely used that as inspiration. And yeah, you've got it going on here. I mean, you found out, we were talking about this just before, and you were saying that Salieri had lots of mistresses in reality. You know what I mean? And kids with different mistresses. I mean, he wasn't necessarily this paragon of virtue that we see him, praying to God every night and stuff. Like, he wasn't that guy. You know what I mean? And in the same way as well, I'd say that Vienna at the time was actually vulgar. I mean, it was the height of vulgarity. That's why they had things like jelly, would you believe? Right? Jelly as a dessert, this is genuinely true, was created in the sort of pre-Victorian era because they liked the way it wobbled. They thought it looked very phallic. And that was kind of like, the same kind of era. People were used to dressing up and going to masquerade balls and having these kind of crazy swingers parties. That was kind of part of it, So Mozart was growing up in the perfect time. It was kind of like, a kid going to Vegas. You know what I mean? And the fact that his music stood out from the crowd just shows how great an artist he was, I suppose.
100%.
Yeah, man. So that was one of the things that we found. But let's take a look at the actors themselves, because this is one of the coolest things. The people up for the role of Mozart when it went into casting was unbelievable. You got top corner here, Kenneth Branagh, the guy who's he'd just done Hamlet at the time, so he was which
is an amazing movie. That one we
Fantastic
have to
movie.
do. Oh my God. The fact
Yeah,
that
we
we
do.
didn't even think about Hamlet for this yet is insane.
He directed it as well, though, right? It was Branagh
Yeah.
directed.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
it's a page by page adaptation of Hamlet. Like, it's insane. And if you haven't seen that, that was even shot on 60 millimeter back in the day, like 65 millimeter, sorry. So, like, that movie is kind of an oddity of its time and the amount of money that went into that production. And Kenneth Branagh was crazy. And I feel like a lot of people know of him as a director, but unfortunately, his more contemporary films, and maybe not unfortunately, I did like his Thor. Like, I did think the first Thor was good. Like, he did a great job, but he has such a depth of work. And dude, this whole lineup's insane. The fact that Mick Jagger was like
Mick
acting
Jagger was
at
up
that
for it.
time,
I
and that's
know,
not
right?
probably too far removed from his involvement in Fitzcarraldo to having like shot half of that movie and then leaving Herzog to like fend for himself and recap,
Yeah.
you know?
Klaus
Dude,
Kinski.
what a crazy time if you were like a part of that crew and could break into Hollywood and be an actor. Just some of the productions you could be up for were like
Bowie.
insane.
Bowie doing Labyrinth. You know what I mean? It's just utterly
Yeah.
nuts that these guys were coming straight off singing and straight into this and were phenomenal. I mean, like Bowie, just throwing it in there, it's way after the time, but still, Bowie in The Prestige, that introduction of him as Tesla is one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, I mean, like these are the guys. And by the way, while we're on Kenneth Branagh, before I forget, right? His Frankenstein is arguably my favorite Frankenstein, including Guillermo del Toro's. Even though we just had Dan Lawson on the pod, who's amazing. I love the guy. Frankenstein
the
by
Robert De
Branagh is
Niro?
awesome. He did the De Niro one.
I remember not
I
liking it.
love
I
it.
need to revisit it because it's been some time. I remember being on a whole Kenneth Branagh kick and going from Henry V, which is awesome. If you haven't seen
Mega.
that, that'd be
Yeah.
great. Then obviously
Crispin's
Hamlet.
dirty. Sorry.
Yeah, Hamlet's great. He even didn't he do a Macbeth, didn't he? Maybe
He
not.
did
I
it
know
best. No,
Polanski did.
Polanski did. Polanski's
Yeah.
is the definitive
And I think
version.
there was another one. Maybe it wasn't Branagh. And then, of course, he did Frankenstein, which I think at the time kind of got a little panned, but I would need to revisit it. Obviously, Guillermo del Toro's is like really awesome.
While we're on that, another diversion, but I've got to throw it in there because I'll forget otherwise. The Polanski version of Macbeth, funded by Playboy.
Oh, wow.
To get his money for the film from somewhere. And that's where he got it from. So there you go. Yeah, I mean, other people who are up for this role is bonkers. Mark Hamill, right, went for so many auditions. He actually played it on stage. So he was like, I'm a shoe-in for this. I'm going to nail it. He'd just come off Empire Strikes Back. Or he was just about to go on Empire Strikes Back. And Miloš Forman was so derogatory. He just said, no one's going to believe Luke Skywalker is Mozart. So just completely cut him off at the knees.
Good.
But yeah, dude, Burt Reynolds, like we're talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you know, and the way that DiCaprio, he was DiCaprio's character, Rick Dalton, was based around Burt Reynolds. And unbelievably, you know, like we're seeing now what he was up for. The things that he was up for in his pomp is unbelievable. You know, I think that Al Pacino was up for Salieri, yeah, he was. So different character, but still, it's pretty cool that we had that those people wanting to act for Miloš is beyond belief. And then yeah, like we were just saying there, mate, in terms of characters, like Tom Hulce's Mozart and F. Murray Abraham's Salieri, one of the crazy things is that Miloš Forman wanted to go with people who were lesser known. So Tom Hulce as Mozart is like, he was just thrown there out of left field. I don't think he'd been in hardly anything prior to this, you know. And this was an Oscar nominated performance. They actually both got nominated for Best Actor at the Oscars. So both couldn't win. And I think it was F. Murray Abraham who won it that year, you know. But like, yeah, these two American actors just got cast out of nowhere. You know, as I said, F. Murray Abraham getting the role ahead of Godfather's Al Pacino is utterly bonkers, but it worked out and they were the best people for it. I think he wanted people who were lesser known, you know, so that you could see him just walk through town and stuff and pass them by. And that was the
I
coolest
saw
thing
some
about him.
trivia or something about F. Murray Abraham and the lengths he had to do to try to get the role. Let me see if F. Murray Abraham wasn't the obvious choice for Salieri. He was relatively unknown, like you said at the time, but Forman saw something in him, the rare ability to make you sympathize with someone confused by envy. Abraham prepared by studying the way jealousy physically manifests in people and then translated that to his like persona on screen.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, like, it is one of the best performances of all time. I mean, I think I spoke to you afterwards when you'd watched it again for the second time, and you were just like, dude, how good are these characters and the way that they're played and the way that the actors portray them and everything like that? They're just masterful. You know what I mean? It really is, like, unbelievable. Oh, yeah, quick bit of trivia for you. Amadeus, Latin for love of God or object of adoration. So that's the reason why they went with Amadeus, because it's this idea of genius from the point of view of somebody who's jealous of them. And there you go. Almost like Jesus' perspective of Judas, I wrote. I think I must have been like incredibly intoxicated when I wrote that last line. But yeah, man, I mean, like, that's the coolest thing. Like, they called it Nietzsche artists, if you ever know, like binary opposition of these people. So somebody who's twisted by admiration and jealousy at the same time. So it's like this guy who is, you know, he admires music. If you remember, there's a bit in it where Salieri, he has the music in front of him and he can just appreciate it for what it is, every single thing. And he's like cutting fast, you know, going through every different type of music, whether it's like an aria or whether it's some piece of overture or something like that. And he's just continually cutting through them as fast as he can. Even if the music goes slow, he's still cutting through as fast as he can, you know. And it's like, yeah, you've got this guy who both is twisted by his admiration for the music and jealous for the guy that is composing it, because he can't believe that somebody who's so puerile and infantile, should I say, not puerile, but infantile, could compose music like this. You know.
And I think something that's interesting is the way that he kind of confides to God throughout the film, saying like, you know, I've like begged for this level of like brilliance. And he looks at Mozart as kind of a pawn that God passes through, which puts Mozart on this really like interesting pedestal in comparison to everyone, where he has, like you said, this twisted admiration. He can see the brilliance. His ego doesn't blind him enough to not also be able to enjoy it. But as he gets further along and he sees these plays, even though like Mozart slowly starts to go into this black period and to have a lot darker of themes and having to grapple with that, which ultimately takes us into the third act, in this like parallel story structure where we see brilliance consume someone into their descent. But then again, we see someone admiring someone that kind of has this jealousy that equally puts them into this descent. And we're seeing two characters kind of falling at the same time. Now, they fall in completely different capacities, one far more, unfortunately, leading the end. But for Salieri, it almost becomes a jail that he has to live in for the rest of his life, you know, to some capacity.
Agreed. I think that's when we're watching it, you know, one of the saddest things of all is, you know, watching the, I mean, which is the line, the bit that I remember the most. Oh yeah, when he's composing the intro march for Mozart, when he's welcoming into the Viennese court, right? He composes this piece and he's sitting there at his harpsichord, and every time he composes a little bit, he looks up at this cross on the wall and he says "Grazie Signore," right? And then we go through the whole scene where Mozart literally like recomposes this piece as soon as he hears it and is able to write variations on it, and it's amazing and it's unbelievable. And then we cut right back to him and it literally bookends the scene, and he looks back up at the cross and he goes "Grazie Signore," and by the end of it we've got him literally burning the crucifix. You know, he's turned his back on God. We've got a guy who literally was thanking the God for killing his father and allowing him to go and be a composer, now turning his back on that God, you know, like. So that's why I think Salieri is the better character, to be honest, in that respect. You know what I mean? A lot more detail.
100%.
You know?
A cool thing that one of our viewers dropped, Steven Leon, what's up, man? It's good to have you on the chat. He said a great line from the film is when Salieri said, "If God doesn't want me to play, then why implant this desire in me?" Which kind of goes back to what I'm saying, then follows through with what you're saying. And it's really, yeah, he's such a great character because you are sympathetic. I mean, to be honest, we all have a little bit of Salieri in us, right?
We do.
We all, you know, even if you don't want to admit it, can envy someone else's brilliance or someone else's ability to do something that might be tough for you, or someone's capability to climb a ladder faster than you, especially being in an art form like film. And I think Forman was speaking to probably similar things that he's experienced along the way. That's kind of being an artist is, one, you obviously, it's going to be healthy if you learn to not have envy, blind your perspective of the craft, but you would be lying to say that envy doesn't creep in some capacity of being an artist, especially in an art form that was hard in the way that film is hard today. Being a composer was not something that was easy to just enter into and to orchestrate and to have all of that money. It did take resources and time and a certain level of curation that a composer is a director, So I think that he's a super fascinating character, and I think he's very relatable. If you remove the fact that these are composers and Mozart and some brilliant artists and just boiled it down to your own life, you could find a Mozart to your Salieri very easily. I don't think it's that removed.
I mean, you and I do it, when we're talking about, we both want to make films, our own films. We both want to write them. We both want to direct them. We both want to get them out there. We both want to get them into theaters. We both want to get them to this level that, we're seeing other people who are younger than us doing it, and that's, there is always going to be a level of jealousy there, but at the same time, you're right, there's a level of admiration. I can read a script and be absolutely in awe of the person who wrote it. I mean, here's a great example. There's a lot of people who'll say that they hate the film, but I read Babylon, Damien Chazelle, and I was just blown away. It's one of the greatest scripts I've ever read. And I'm not, I'm absolutely amazed by the fact that this young man, who is in his early 30s, can write, I read First Man almost immediately afterwards and was blown away by it, and it's like, that's exactly what we get with Salieri. He loves what Mozart puts out. He loves the whole vocation of music. He just can't contribute to it. He can't be part of it. You know what I mean? Everything he does is almost, even trying to kill himself is just, he fails at. He won't ever reach that level. And that's what makes these characters so interesting. I mean, Mozart himself, Miloš talked to Tom Hulce and said, I want you to play it like McEnroe. Right, I want you to be, this sort of counterculture, sort of totally off the rails, not afraid about embarrassing yourself in public, not afraid about making a scene. I want you to play it like that. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in sport right here. There's people out there that you can say in sport are like this, that are very kind of infantile and punk rock and very different. Name them, shout them out, put them in the chat if you want to do anything like that. That's what Miloš was trying to capture. That there are people out there who will have God-given talent bestowed upon them.
And they also disregard, like, embarrassment's not something that really bothers them, right? A lot of times what we're so fearful of when taking that next step is kind of being embarrassed or not being able to be good at something, or what if you mess up or whatever it is. And you have these characters, and who embodies that in a lot of ways is Shane. Not to bring this back to like Filmmakers Academy, but what makes him so brilliant is he's able to be this kind of like DP that's willing to put himself out there and do something that might be against the grain. And you see that in other people like Steve Jobs. And I think that's a very common thread of someone that's like, brilliant in their own right. You might have a different talent. Shane's is obviously lighting and being a filmmaker. Miloš Forman, he probably had his own brilliance, and they were just not fearful of like putting themselves out there and failing. And I think that's something that we can always learn.
Yeah. I was just saying, I worked on the Michael Jackson movie, which is coming out in April, and I don't know what's going to happen with regard to a second film, but we'll see that. We'll see a childhood genius, you know what I mean, and see where they go, you know what I mean, and the craziness that surrounds them. I think that's something that we're seeing in this film. We're certainly going to see in other films. It's never going to stop happening, Yeah, one of the cool things that I found with this film as well, going back to it, is Salieri. We tried to look at things that were sort of their vices. Mozart's was drinking. Mozart's was being this kind of vulgar, crazy guy. Remember when he's dragging his wife or his future wife through under the tables and stuff, and he's saying, eat my shit and all this kind of stuff like that, all that across the movie. In this movie as well, if you look at Salieri, his was sweets. You know what I mean? In the opening scene, they're trying to get him out. Like these two guys who are on screen now, they were trying desperately to pull him out and say, oh, I've got this really nice, whatever it is, donut. I don't think it's a donut. They weren't invented then. But, like whatever the food was that they were trying to do. The next time we see him, the first time he meets Mozart, he's stealing sweets. You know what I mean? So like he's walking around and trying to eat stuff. This is at a time where even if we go back to modern day, you know, Miloš Forman's in Czech Republic with his crew that weren't getting sweet treats and everything like this. They were getting pretty rudimentary food because it was a Soviet country. It was communist. You know what I mean? They could only have a certain amount. They couldn't indulge in all these kind of things. But at the time that when Salieri was doing it, this was the height of sort of, you know, rich person culture. So I like the fact that we see Salieri having this kind of craving over sweets all the way through. And when he's with Mozart the first time, he's offering him sweets. You know what I mean? It's like these are all these things he offers Frau Mozart nipples of Venus. You know what I mean? Which that's probably gets taken down there, Sweeney. You know what I mean? When I use the N word, but you know, that's one of the things that I found most interesting with this film. When we're seeing him, we see this kind of vice that Salieri has, which is his sweets, you know, and I quite like the fact that was totally different to what Mozart's was, which was drinking heavily. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought that was certainly something that I've always enjoyed about this film.
And when you look at that frame too, with the two gentlemen that kind of open up this film, trying to lure Salieri out to ultimately find him in the state without spoiling too much for those of watched the movie. Something that I really
seen it, you got to see it. All right, I'm sorry, Sweeney, you got to watch
there's
this movie.
Spoilers in this, but we'll leave that one maybe. But 100%, you need to watch this movie. But speaking to these characters and what I think he's always been good at as a director, especially, and I think this also happens to be true of directors at that time, in particular 70s and 80s directors. They were really good at defining all of the characters that came on screen. And for something like this movie where there's an abundance of characters and it's not quite an ensemble, I mean, I guess you could say it is an ensemble film because a lot of
ensemble.
Yeah, it's an ensemble film. Like, these characters are also individually well designed, especially when you come to kind of the people that surround what is the gentleman, I want to use the right term, he's royalty, right? Like, what was his his label in the hierarchy, the main guy?
The emperor?
The emperor in Vienna.
Yeah.
All of the like individual people that kind of surrounded him were so well defined and added to the story and to the dialogue of Mozart and his placement in this world. And especially when he's trying to do what it's called Figaro, right?
Yeah.
The like French play, and make that into an opera. Like, there was just such good commentary in the way that characters would bounce off one another. And I think that's the testament to the writing, right? It's like, and also to his work with just actors in this opening scene, to go full circle. It's like, you don't really know much about these characters, but you're able to learn a lot with a little bit. And I think that is just so brilliant because these characters don't necessarily come back into this story, from what I recall, right?
That's them.
Die after this, but they do a good job. You really don't know what their background is, but what they could be in relation to Salieri, as you see like this, what ultimately unfolds here.
Yeah, and you know, I think that I think something that I was going to say about this scene as well is, like, again, everything being lit by candlelight. This was Miloš Forman said that he wanted it to be like Barry Lyndon. He fell in love with Barry Lyndon, which, by the way, is one of my favorite Kubricks. And like, this is another example of it. He was constantly trying to use low lighting, candle lighting all the way through, you know. So these guys have got hold of it right here, you know. And then even at the beginning, when they're pushing him through all of Vienna in the night on that sort of makeshift ambulance sled, whatever the hell it is that they're dragging him around in, you know.
That's crazy. I'm reading. One of the things that I really love about this movie too, which I believe you even built some stuff out, or you have some like things to pull up, is just the costumes of this movie.
Yeah, I was going to jump to that right now, actually. Yeah, go on.
Perfect timing. We got to talk about the costumes. I mean, the makeup too. We can't even miss that, because the makeup for Salieri, I mean, there's actually some photos. You can find some BTS, and I saw some other ones you had there of like what they did. And I was watching it with Kier. Yeah, that's a great photo. And I was watching it with Kier, and he was like, is that really the same person? And she actually thought it was an old person.
Old guy.
You know, that they casted at the time, and was like not even the same Salieri. So
this is actually on this the makeup right now. If anybody lives in LA, the makeup is actually on show at the Academy Museum. And it's all the stuff that this guy here who's on the sort of left of shot, Dick Smith did. And Dick Smith is famous for doing The Exorcist. He also did Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman. He did a bunch of films, and won multiple Oscars. He's one of the like leviathans of hair and makeup, or makeup, like ever. And this is him right here. This is what the process that he had to go through with Salieri, and I believe it was 5 hours every day. Which, all right, don't get me wrong, I think that Jacob Elordi for Frankenstein was in the chair for about 7. What Guillermo was saying, but yeah, I mean, this is a great example of at the time 5 hours in makeup chair was an awful lot, you know. And the things that he did, which is utterly nuts. And if I go through, you can see it. Yeah, he did all these things. So aging him from a 44-year-old, which was the time when he was interacting with Mozart, to 80 years old at the end was, 4.5 hours to 5 hours every day for 3 weeks. He added liver spots on his face. He did long, thinning white hair. He had lines added all the way over his face, so it looked like they were all creased. You know, he'd gone through an awful lot. And then these dark pockets under his eyes. And they were using foam latex at the time, so it took even longer to apply them. So, like, you know, Salieri, no wonder F. Murray Abraham was in a bad mood all the way through filming, because he literally spent an awful long time sitting in the chair with all of this weighing down his face, you know. But I mean, like, the other thing that they did, which is even cooler, and I've got a picture of it here, is they had to put these sort of contact lenses on him. And apparently, like, you know, nowadays contact lenses are nothing, right? But in those days, they had to put them on with like a suction gun, like, and make sure that it was like, because they were so heavy, these contact lenses, to make his eyes go all dark.
Probably
and sort of,
dangerous
like,
too.
yellow.
I think contact lenses back then, like, if you didn't put them on right, you could go blind. I don't think, like, they're not as advanced as like what a contact lens is today.
This is why he deserved the Oscar, because of this. You know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, it was in against Tom Hulce, but he went through it. You know what I mean? Went through some
I
hell
want to
stuff.
play that back. I have no idea if that's true. I'm just assuming.
It looks bad though, man. I mean, like, look
Yeah,
at it.
looking at that, I'm like, whoa. I could never do that. I don't think I could ever my eyes are so sensitive as it is. I don't think I couldn't put a contact in right now, which is why I wear glasses at night. So, I mean, dude, insane.
We've been doing night shoots, and honestly, when it gets to sort of like, so we're starting at like, I don't know, like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it goes through till 5 a.m., 6 a.m., right? There gets a point like 3 a.m. where my eyes are pricking, you know what I mean? And I'm literally like stood there on set like this, looking all crazy, because it's so dry and it's so, you know, and we've been shooting into like this kind of mister and everything like that. So yeah, contact lenses are not fun, you know? I should be wearing my glasses a lot more. But but yeah, and then the wigs, as I said, I already said it before, but we see these wigs get slowly darker. They go from this sort of poofiness, like pink coloured almost, when he was conducting, which that picture we saw at the beginning. And as they go through, Mozart's the one who changes his wigs to the point where, like, at the end, it's like this kind of almost the Joker. You know what I mean? He almost looks a little bit like Heath Ledger's Joker by the end there. You know what I mean? He's really gone through it. And again, they wanted him to look like punk rock. They wanted it to be like punk, as if you know, he was sort of like the Sex Pistols or something like that. Never mind the Buzzcocks themselves, stuff like that. And here's the costume again, you know, these elaborate costumes that they had made. Miloš insisted that they aged them like themselves. The costumers had to age them by hand, right? So that's why every costume, and you think about the number of extras as well, Sweeney. We're not talking about people being scanned here and then they can put an extra 50 in the background or anything like that, like on Lord of the Rings or anything. Like, this is genuinely
and I have this number.
Go for it.
Like, so costumes won at the Oscars, and obviously for good reason, like you're showcasing here. They created over 1,100 pieces, period costumes. Many used 18th century techniques, even the wigs, every piece of lace and every button obsessively researched and then executed. So a lot of the manufacturing was even done in the way that it would have been back then, to like have that authenticity, probably in the stitching patterns and all of that stuff, which is insane. And I have a question, maybe you know this, and if not, I can look into it. I'm assuming like the pink wig and some of his earlier wigs that you said are like punk rock, that's not accurate, right? Or did he wear? Yeah, okay, that was kind of like a creative liberty.
Yeah, I think they took creative liberties, but Miloš was happy to do that. I think he wanted it to be this kind of idea of, look, we like there's more to Mozart than this, because it's like we showed that. That's one of the reasons why I showed the trailer at the beginning. You know, it's incredibly difficult to sell something like that. It's the same way I suppose Shakespeare in Love was difficult to sell to people, and Hamnet has been difficult to sell to people because everybody thinks, oh, it's just going to be about Shakespeare. That's going to be boring. But in fact, it's one of the best films I've ever seen. You know what I mean? I'm sure you agree. So it's like, this is why, you know, they took these extra creative lens. And one of the things that I was talking to, so I've been working at LASC, the specialty costume, right, where they do all stuff for like the boys and do all these different costumes and stuff. And I was talking to costumers the other day and said, is it more exciting for you guys to get something like this where it's massive? I mean, you've got the number of people that they're having to clothe is bonkers, you know what I mean? And the amount of detail that has to go into costumes like this is absolutely crazy. But I imagine having people researching all this and having people who are sitting with them and they've got all the pictures and everything like this on the walls, I bet that's one of the coolest parts of the job, rather than doing something that's kind of like set modern day and you've just kind of got a lot, you know, got a bunch of cops and you've got a few firemen, you've got a few construction workers, where it's not really having to go into that detail. With this, I bet that's a thrill being a costumer. I bet this is where the thrill comes from, getting able to do this research and really knuckle down onto what's required, you know?
Here's an alternative question, and I would love your opinion on where something like this is trying to be authentic. And there's obviously even still in this like scenario, some creative liberties, right? We see that with some of the wigs and likely some of the other costumes. I think the costume party is one particular set piece that's really awesome. But when thinking of other movies, like for example, The Odyssey is coming out, and that movie's had a lot of consideration just because of Christopher Nolan's take on some of the wardrobe, and that is not necessarily period accurate. What are your thoughts about when a director does that, and kind of more so with like a costume designer, people in wardrobe? Do you think that they struggle sometimes when it's meant not to be exactly period accurate? Or maybe that's a weird question, but I'm curious to what your thoughts are with that.
No, I mean, going into Odyssey, I studied classics and ancient history at university. That was like my 4-year university degree. So I studied all the ancients and things like that. I studied the Odyssey itself. And like, I'll be honest, like the Odyssey is a fantasy book. It's the Lord of the Rings of ancient Greece. You know, it was written about a war that might have taken place, but like it was Homer creating, you know, oral poetry. He was talking about it. And one of the things that they used to do was they used to talk about the armor and the greaves and the, you know, the armors that goes on their arms and their swords and their weapons and everything. They used to, you know, Homer used to go off on one and talk in depth about the engravings that were on their shields and all this kind of stuff. Well, if you were to take the, you know, period specific armor from that time, then yeah, I mean, people have put it out there. You've seen it, you know, this is what Odysseus should be dressed like, and he looks like a lampshade. And it's like, yeah, I mean, like if Odysseus was an Ithacan warrior, then fine, but this was a mythical warrior, you know what I mean, not an Ithacan warrior. And the mythical stuff is entirely up to interpretation. And I think that, you know,
That's
like
interesting.
yeah, and I think that as well, what we've got to look at is, you know, like you want this to look really cool. I mean, like we were talking before we came on about Mel Gibson movies and about Braveheart and about things like that, right? And it's like, mate, Braveheart wasn't period specific, but at the same time, it looked really cool. You know, the swords doing is really cool. Everything that they did was really, really cool. The chances of that being like absolutely accurate, it just wasn't. It wasn't accurate. But I think that we have to allow these stories to evolve in the same way that we've evolved. You know what I mean? And we have to allow people like Nolan. I mean, he's telling this story with armor that was quite similar to you know. I don't know what happened then. Oh yeah, you're putting it up. Yeah. So, armor that was quite similar to, you know, what we've read about in books and what we've read about in the Odyssey and things like that. And this, I think that, to be honest, Odysseus looks really cool in this, and the Agamemnon uniform looks cool. And in fact, if you look at the face of Agamemnon that was found at Mycenae, you know, which is a piece of metal that Heinrich Schliemann found, right, which is this sort of metal engraving, like you couldn't tell from that what the costume should be like for a Mycenaean king. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like Agamemnon. So therefore, it's open to interpretation. And that's exactly what Nolan's doing. I mean, somebody said something the other day, which is really cool, which may be way off piece, but I'm going to say it, right? In ancient Egypt is so long a period, thousands of years, that during ancient Egypt, you had ancient Egyptian historians talking about ancient Egypt, right? Like the ancient Egypt had an ancient Egypt that they referred to. That's how long Egypt went on for. We're talking 5,000 years. So, like, we can't really say this is exactly how it was meant to look, or this is exactly how the Egyptians were. I mean, at the end of the Odyssey, the book, which is one of the cool bits, we'll get, as I said, we're off Amadeus now, but we're on Odyssey. At the end of the Odyssey, there is a line that literally led into the next part of the Odyssey, which couldn't be finished because Homer didn't finish it. And it says, and then there came an Amazonian queen. Like, there was an Amazonian queen who was part of, the Battle of Troy that we never hear about because it was literally a final line that never got finished. So we know that other people joined in this battle, this mythical battle, which will probably not be told in this. It wasn't told in Troy. It's, so we've got these creative liberties, and I think that somebody like Nolan has taken liberties over it. And in the same way, you look at Miloš Forman, you look at Amadeus, he had an idea in mind, and he wanted Mozart to be this kind of hodgepodge of McEnroe and punk rock and all this kind of stuff. So make it punk rock, but make it Viennese punk rock from the 1750s, you know what I mean? And that's what they came up with.
And it's still very grounded. It's not like it's so punctuated that it doesn't work. Maybe that you would see in some other movies that try to have stylization. I'm trying to think of a good example of a movie that doesn't quite work in the same way that Amadeus does. But nonetheless, like, the film still is inherently grounded. It never escapes itself, which I think is the general rule of thumb with a film like that. And here, I'll stop sharing my screen. But yeah, I'm super excited about The Odyssey. That's a movie I know that come many months from now, we'll definitely talk about. And what's really awesome about The Odyssey is it comes out on my birthday, and I got IMAX tickets to see it on 70 mil.
Are you on front row, though? You're front row, right?
Yeah, it's like center, at least 2 rows back. So at least it's center. It's not like front row and off to the left. But hey, Nolan opening night on my birthday. There is 2 directors that are brilliant that always launch in July. One is Nolan. He is a brilliant filmmaker in his own right. And then Kubrick, to my understanding, was always a July director. He dropped it. July is one of the more interesting months in the calendar year for movies because it's typically like blockbuster cinema, summer movies, summer hits. Dark Knight came out in July, or June, July, 2 really big months in the calendar
Kids coming off school in it as well. That's when you're going to get the biggest,
Yeah, so you try to get those big blockbuster movies. May is also a really good month. Sinners came out in May. But I really love July. There's been so many great films, and I got to see Oppenheimer before it was even out. I got to go to a private photochem screening with the team that worked on Oppenheimer to deliver, obviously, the grade and to deliver the prints. And I was sitting next to the guy that worked on QCing the prints. And this was the first time it ran through the projector. It was the test screening. So a lot of times you can get an audience just to come and watch it. The people that worked on it. And Shane, thank you for doing this because that was my birthday gift. 2 years ago, I got to be with like Dave Cole and all of these people watching Oppenheimer in 70 mil at the Universal Waterfront Theater here in Los Angeles. And that will definitely be something that sticks with me for a long time, because how many times do you get that opportunity to see like the first time it runs through a print? So this was pristine, no scratches, no any of that stuff. Yeah.
No, nothing gathering on it. I'm so jealous. You have literally, wiped the feet from under me with that one. I can't beat you.
Theater experiences, and then we'll get back, because I think to speak to this movie, if you had the chance, I would love to know, drop this in the chat, but seeing this in light, like when it came out, would have been awesome. And there's really nothing better, like going back to the Lord of the Rings and that impact of the Fellowship of the Ring. I just had that again this year with Hamnet. Hamnet was one of the best theater experiences I've had in a long time. The last time Nolan completely put me on my ass was Interstellar. That was a brilliant theater experience, and I bet you this movie would have been a really awesome theater experience.
I agree. I think so. I mean, I've seen it once.
Have you seen it?
I've seen it once, 70 mil. But the weirdest one for me is this. I saw it live with the LA Phil like 3-4 years ago, right? At the Hollywood Bowl, right? And that whole experience was ruined for me, right? This is a weird one for you, right? Because they have closed captions, right? And Hollywood Bowl allows people to drink all the way through it, right? We had a drunk woman behind us who was treating the closed captioning like it was karaoke, right? So she's literally reading the Salieri lines. She was doing this, right? Let me find the line, right? Where's the bit? There's a bit in this which I just like stop. Oh yeah, this bit, right? So she was like, and music finished as no music is ever finished. And I was like, look, right, hang on a minute, right? I don't want to hear you talking about it. I want to hear Salieri. I want to hear F. Murray Abraham. I don't need this like, drunk woman behind me who was just giving it some, you know what I mean? And then she started singing along with songs that were in the opera. I was like, this has killed the whole film experience for me, because the LA Phil were crushing it. You know what I mean? They were doing Mozart's Requiem, they were doing all this stuff. Because
I probably would have turned around and just said, "Stop talking, please." But maybe that's a bit brash.
Do you know the saddest thing, right? Is that she had I think she had a beefy husband, and I didn't want to kind of, I didn't want to get
smart one.
That was it, mate. I wouldn't be able to experience this film properly again, knowing that halfway through, just as Salieri's going through his turn, I got my nose put out of joint, So in the end, I just walked back. But yeah, I mean, that was my experience of this one live. But I had another one where I went to watch it in 70 mil, and it was.
I bet you the Egyptian or someone who does a lot of older movies will probably come back. But that's one thing that definitely does suck about like modern theater experiences. I'm not like a stickler, but of course, if you're like talking or have your phone out, it's like, yo, this is a movie. At least like focus on what you paid for. I don't care if people eat popcorn or like make a little bit of noise. Honestly, feeling the audience, like in particular, Hamnet. That was amazing, because that was such a communal experience, and hearing other people's hearts ache as that movie progressed and you went through sequence to sequence is what ultimately elevated that film. I felt that when watching Interstellar, having that communal feeling when you're connecting with people and you're feeling their heartbreak. Like, I remember when Coop comes back from being on that planet and he watches the cast in Interstellar, and it was like a needle could drop. What you could hear was everyone's eyes sniffling. I remember I was like, the girlfriend I was with at the time, her and I sobbed so hard, and I had that same thing happen with Hamnet watching that movie, but I could feel everyone around us. And without giving anything away for that movie, that third act where you feel not only the characters in the film reach out trying to have this shared experience, you as an audience member wanted to do the same exact thing as you finally have this moment that resolves. And I love that in movies. And you get that similarly here with Amadeus and watching these characters plunge into their own darkness, right? It's just the way that movies can impact you. And when you're a good director and understand that a part of the film is, and Michael Cimino talks about this really eloquently with his process as a director. And I think this goes back to what a lot of directors also thought, is film is a very 2D medium, right? And Michael Cimino always talked about coming from a background of ballet and thinking of theater and staging, and how ballet and opera, like in this, it's a 3D medium.
It is.
You have a lot more access and depth. And even though it's in person, what Cimino always talked about, going from being in ballet to then working, I believe, on Saks Fifth Ave and working in the commercial space, he always brought this sense of blocking, which I think is a note, and everyone should honestly, if you're not writing this down, you should, is try to make your blocking as 3D as possible against the camera, because it creates a world that feels a lot more realistic. It's like it's a 2D medium, and anything that you can do to make your image more dimensional or more tangible or have depth. The depth is not only the crafting of an image. Depth comes in the way your characters move in a frame, maybe the way the camera moves, maybe the way the architecture is. There's a lot of ways to add depth. It doesn't even also have to be within the frame. It could be the music that personifies the emotions that the characters are, or that perfect needle drop that PTA is able to do. But when you watch something like Amadeus and and this is also a really good DP using the right lens to be able to express the worlds that they're in. And like crafting an image is not only lighting and the lens that you choose and the format you choose to shoot on. It's the way that the characters move. And I really highly recommend, if you haven't watched like something like The Deer Hunter or Heaven's Gate or even some of his earlier movies, Cimino was a brilliant like director when it came to actor blocking. And I would say a contemporary version of that is Spielberg. Like Spielberg is notably really masterful when it comes to blocking. And if there's one thing that unfortunately has fallen to the wayside with the immediacies of modern film production and digital capture, is you get a lot less rehearsal time. And I do want to say that you as a director and you as a cinematographer, even though productions have sped up, that doesn't mean you can't request it and find an AD that's good enough to build in and understand and appreciate the power of blocking and crafting an image. And when we're talking about, you know, people wondering why people don't want to watch movies or they don't get entrenched, it's not just a hook. It's not just that the movie needs to have action in the first 3 minutes. It's that we need filmmakers that are really studying the craft, not only for making a pretty image. It's about really studying the importance of every component. And Kubrick, and I know like I'm on my soapbox here and then I go full circle and pass
Stay
it
on
back
it.
to
I
you.
don't mind.
Like,
No, it's good.
Kubrick talked about how mathematical filmmaking is, and not to say that there's not artistry and this like spiritual, like you're a funnel and you're putting that on screen. You do have to look at film as an equation, and in being a director, he would always talk about it's just making sure you have the right recipes to make the right equation. And there's a lot of different recipes and different things that you can make that mathematical equation. But if you do break it down and try to have every decision have importance and have a reason. And I know you hear this all the time. That's like film school 101, but like get granular and start getting philosophical with that process. The directors, and granted, the 70s and 80s was particularly, and even the 60s was particularly a different time because so much of film back then was more director driven. And there's a really awesome documentary, and I'm going to pull this up and drop it in the chat right now. That's called
put it in now.
And Unmaking of Heaven's Gate. And if you haven't seen Heaven's Gate, there's like the movie that Michael Cimino made after it ended United Artists as a like company, a studio itself, which was the company that Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffiths, right, and Mary Pickford started.
Correct.
He essentially
Douglas
got
Fairbanks.
Douglas Fairbanks. I'm going to drop this in the chat right now on IMDb. You can find this if someone wants to do me a favor and find the link to this. I think I put the wrong link here. Give me one sec. There, it's the making, and it's called Final Cut, the making and unmaking of Heaven's Gate. And if someone could find the YouTube video, you can find this for free, broken up in chapters, so you shouldn't have to pay for it. But they talk about how traditional production was made, and it was the writer, the producer, and the director. And Forman in this movie kind of falls under the period of director-driven productions, which is why you kind of get a lot more of like that tangibility versus today, which is a lot more of a producer kind of top-heavy productions. And I'm not going to say what's better or worse. I like the director-driven approach more, but having like 10 producers is a different way, or actor-driven productions. But to kind of go full circle, it's these directors back then, they really studied the art of blocking and the art of like all of these things need to be considered and point towards the ultimate goal being the script and the story that you're telling. And I think that's just something that we can see here.
Is it something that you would say that with digital filmmaking as kind of that's the reason it's taken the hit? Because like Shane always used to say, but like I've spoken to other filmmakers who've said the same, who were around in the 80s and 90s, who used to say when you hear that film fluttering, you know everybody's got to be on it, everything's got to be going, because it's costing the production money every time that you literally start the camera rolling. Whereas nowadays you can start it rolling, you can start again, you can leave it rolling. You know, there's the preciousness of every shot isn't there anymore. It's a little bit like us with our iPhones, right? Like if somebody used to look back at our iPhones nowadays, like it's just like I've got 45 pictures on my table, you know what I mean? Or I've got pictures of food, or like my hair for when I go to the hairdressers and stuff like that. Whereas back in the day, when you were taking shots literally on film, it took, you know, like you made sure you savored every single one of them. You know what I mean? You made
Yeah.
sure that it was an important thing that you were posting up there. Do you think that's the reason why now blocking can be sort of like a little bit more fluid when people are on set? Because I'm seeing things be changed on set every day. Whenever I'm on set, I'm seeing them going, you know, they'll go into a huddle and then they'll come up with another idea and then they'll just try it. Whereas back in those days, I think that probably you had to be a lot more regimented because of the cost of the film that you were using. Do you think
Yeah.
that, or am I
One, I
back in
think it's
between?
just no. I think you're really close. I think all of it's true. I think honestly, there's so many variables at play. I think traditionally speaking, when productions were shot on film, the science and the craftsmanship was really under the perspective of the DP and the director, because it was
Mm,
really hard for a producer to come up and say, "Hey, I want that to be different." Sure, you could see the directing happening and what's happening, but what's happening in the camera, you know, you have to look through a viewfinder. Until like the 90s, modern video taps and getting a signal from a film camera was just not as much of a thing. You know,
yeah.
like Kubrick, I think on Eyes Wide Shut, that was one of the like larger productions to adopt a video signal out of a tap to be able to view back what you just shot and have some type of playback. So
Very good
that
point.
movie came out in
Yeah.
1999. So that's
Yeah.
not too far removed from today, if you really want to think about it. And I think what happened with digital, and there's like a multitude of stuff here, but digital allowed it to be seen by a lot more people. When you go on a
Correct.
modern production outside of like a Nolan film, you're sending a video signal to all of these people. Scripty has it. You have your producer tent that maybe has it. You have the actors being able to watch it. You have a lot of people who have potential weight and invested interest in the production, maybe financially, maybe they're the actor, whatever it is, to be able to criticize and say, "Hey, I don't like this." And I
Yeah.
think that potentially creates this kind of like unbalanced hierarchy in film. And that doesn't mean that people can't provide opinions. I'm not saying the director or the DP should be the ones that like say, "Hey, this is what I need to do." Eventually someone has to make a decision, but I just think it's easier for there to become a more cooks in the kitchen scenario. I
Agree.
do think when it comes to crafting an image in a 3D sense, for those that haven't shot on film and looked through an optical viewfinder, and rest in peace, Arri used to make an Alexa that had an optical viewfinder, which was Deacon's favorite camera for a reason. And Deacon's always talked about this philosophy that it was a lot easier to create a 3D image when looking through an optical viewfinder on a film camera, because you were seeing a 3D space. Now,
Mm.
when you look into like an OLPF, right? Or an OLPF, yeah, am I saying that right? I don't know why I'm
Yeah.
having like a brain fart, right? But anyways,
I
you
thought
know
you
what
were
I
saying
mean.
it right.
A digital viewfinder, right?
Yeah.
You are looking at a 2D image. You're looking at a small screen that's magnified, so you can't, as a human, naturally feel that depth
Yeah.
that is there. And I think that's one of the things that's a little bit different is cinematographers today that don't have the experience of shooting on film. It's being able to look through a lens physically
Mm.
changes the way you block, changes the way that you compose, changes the way that you look at coverage, changes the way you even might look at lighting, maybe less so out of those that I just listed. Um, but I think that is one of the biggest things, that shooting with a camera like that just gives you a different sense and closeness to the film production that you are not afforded when shooting digital. That does not mean that digital is bad or that digital is an inferior medium. I think digital does a lot of things that film just can't do. You
Yeah.
know, like film in the traditional sense, whether you like it or not, or it's not your flavor. Like, for example, The Hobbit with,
Mm.
you know, Peter Jackson shooting 48
All in
frames.
reds, right?
Yeah, on Reds, that was definitely a choice, definitely a different experience, kind of removes that gauze and brought you into this almost like reality as you were following these characters. If you didn't get to see high frame rate delivery, you
Mm.
can see that with Avatar right now, that is variable frame rate where it goes up to 48. But that is something that digital can't do. And I think one of the things that really changed film production, again, it's better and worse. You win some and you lose some. As film became just far more of an accessible medium too, in the traditional, like, these directors were very like studied. right? They spent a lot of time studying. A lot of times they went through the traditional path of going to a university and learning under other filmmakers, like James Mangold learning from Forman. They have a more like traditional perspective and understanding of film. And I think it's amazing that film is more accessible. I think that film is in a far better place because of it, but you do tend to get a lot less. Maybe quality is not the word that I want to use, but you tend to see maybe people aren't realizing these certain attributes or not like considering certain aspects of the filmmaking process. And I don't even want to come like I'm coming from a place of authority to say that, but maybe just thinking of how technology allows there to just be maybe more sloppiness because you can just roll and maybe try to do things in real time. And to be honest, there's really amazing filmmakers that can do that. That's also a very valid process. I don't think that doing it in the way of blocking is the only way to make a movie. If you want to be Terrence Malick and find the scene and bring a movie together in post, it's like, look at what he's capable of doing. But Terrence Malick also made a very traditional film, and he understands the rules in which he was willing to break in favor to telling the story that he wanted to tell, like The Thin Red Line, which really introduces that more poetic perspective. And then he doubled down for The New World, and then he doubled down again for The Tree of Life, right?
Tree of Life, yeah.
Yeah. So there's no right or wrong, but I think there's a lot of variables, you know, and digital is just a very accessible medium. And I think it's just a lot more people can toy with it, maybe. And also studios, we're losing budgets. You don't have as much time. You can't do an eyes wide shut production and shoot for 400 days. Like that stuff, like, you know, very seldom, unless you're Christopher Nolan, right? And how many people are Christopher Nolan? There's only one of that dude.
That's true. And he's filming for, what was it, 7 months on the Odyssey? All over the world?
Yeah.
Iceland, Ireland, you name it. He's been...
Here's an interesting take from Dustin. He just wrote this, my 2 cents, we prioritize look over feel. I blame a lot of this on the DPs. They care more about the light than acting. And personally, I think acting is far more important, which is also a very valid perspective. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
I'd agree with that. I mean, like, we're looking at this film, we're looking at Amadeus right now, and I think that Forman really kind of dived into what the characters, what the actors were bringing to the performance. You know what I mean? And I think that as well, like, one of the things that we're not seeing as much these days is you know, directors impressing an idea upon upon an actor, and then allowing that actor to just go for it and see what they come up with. Like a good example, Training Day, probably with Denzel Washington. Most of that character, Alonzo, was mostly just something he created. You know what I mean? Like if you read the script and stuff like that, he doesn't adhere to it probably for 70% of his scenes. You know what I mean? A lot of the stuff is stuff that he's crafting himself and he's bringing to the part. And in fact, if you could say he literally won that Oscar himself by bringing that through. I mean, Antoine Fuqua did some amazing work, you know, with the film itself. But Denzel Washington brought something completely different, something that we wouldn't expect. I think that crafting an acting performance like that is something that is more seldom seen now. I mean, look back in the days when you were seeing like Jack Nicholson crafting something, even up to the point of like Departed. You know, you hear these stories about him literally saying, "What if I do this? What if I do that? What if I do the other?" He's bringing something totally different to the role. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see that from Paul Mescal. Maybe we'll see that from Jacob Elordi. Maybe we'll see that from Chalamet. You know what I mean? But like the people that we're seeing it from are people like DiCaprio. You know what I mean? And I think that what was the one I heard Paul Thomas Anderson talking about the other day? Oh yeah, he was saying in a Q&A that I went to, he was talking about how Benicio del Toro just completely transformed that role of Sensei. Completely transformed it. It was totally different to how it was written. And he came and he said, I've got this idea about how I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. You know what I mean? And it's a phenomenal performance. You know what I mean? And I think that at that point, what do you become as a cameraman? Just a vessel for that performance in itself. How do I capture this and how do I put it on screen as good as it can be? Because sometimes you can probably take away from that by trying to do it all in a specific shot or try and move shots around and stuff like that. You want to be there to capture that performance, that one moment, that lightning in a bottle. If you can make that into phenomenal camera scenes, camera movements and everything like that, while capturing that, great. But yeah, maybe we do prioritize, you know, acting performance on top of it. I mean, this is going to this now. If I was to share the screen, it kind of leads in nicely to this, actually, which is this scene, which is towards the end when Mozart dies, and on his deathbed he's composing Requiem. By the way, Sweeney, I looked this up, and this literally happened. Like, Mozart was composing Requiem as he was dying, and there is a link to potentially some shady character coming and paying him to write this kind of stuff. So, like, that's not out of the realms of possibility from Peter Schaffer's screenplay. But like this scene here, Miloš Forman insisted upon just doing cross coverage. He wanted to shoot in a long take, like in theater, you know, which is wild because like he also wanted to do that when he was in the theater itself, when he was filming the operas. And obviously you've got these candles. So what he did was he ordered for 3-wick candles to be made that would burn longer, so therefore they could do longer takes with the candles burning, you know. So you've got that, which is pretty cool. But this one here, he had 2 cross coverage, 2 cameras, and then they all had earwigs in, which is earpieces that were feeding them music. And the musical consultant, which was a guy called Neville Mariner, who's a musical genius, he conducted, I think it was the Orchestra of St. Martin in the Fields, so like this really amazing orchestra. I think they were used in Interstellar soundtrack as well. He was the musical consultant, and he was feeding them music and the musical passages that Tom Hulce is saying, that he's talking about when he's composing it, and also that Salieri's hearing whilst he's writing it. And one of the things that Forman allowed in this scene was he got them, they rehearsed it for months, I believe. And then one of the things that he allowed them to do was he allowed them to just, you know, bring themselves to the scene. So you actually had Tom Hulce's character was just rushing ahead in the scene and deliberately omitting lines that were in the script and stuff like that. And when you see F. Murray Abraham getting frustrated and getting stressed out and things like that, it's because he literally was stressed out because he didn't know what line was coming next, and he had to keep, you know, putting Tom Hulce back on the lines. But that worked because what it did was it gave us this amazing performance. So what you're seeing there is literally 2 heavyweights giving this phenomenal sort of Jewel-esque performance, you know what I mean? And that's my favorite scene in the movie by a long, long way.
Yeah, no, it is really good. And Cameron just said that Salieri relays an offer for 100 florins for finishing in 24 hours when he was coming in that mask, right? And that that is the equivalent today to like 10 million is what he was saying in terms of dollar. Yeah. In contrast,
comment. Well done for that. I like that.
And in contrast, this fabulous debt was the equivalent of $50,000 today.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a great scene. I mean, the end of the movie, especially, is the way that it does this pendulum swing from the beginning and showing this opulence to becoming more, right? Because a lot of the movie, you're starting in these grand spaces with a lot of space, a lot of people, and as it progresses and as the tone of the movie shifts, and you see these characters kind of descending to what will ultimately be this moment here as it becomes a smaller and smaller space. Even Mozart and who he's playing to as he goes to more of the like commoner venues, right? It becomes a smaller venue to who he's playing to and to the audience that he's playing, until ultimately his smallest audience that you could argue he's performing right here for Salieri in real time, because they're making the music and Salieri almost becomes like his instrument, his mouthpiece to play it back for him to listen to. It's like in these final moments, they crafted his final like his final show, if you will, and it's between 2 characters, him and someone else.
Yeah, I mean, look at the journey of discovery that Salieri goes through. You know, at the beginning, he's a listener, you know, and somebody who's an admirer in terms of listening. And then by this point, we're actually, you know, he's always wondering how God can speak through this character. Finally, at the end, he's seeing the genius of the character, literally composing on his deathbed, literally singing. You know, he is the instrument of God, I suppose. And now, you know, like you just said, Salieri has become his instrument. You know, it's literally passed from one through to the other. And yeah, that's why it's my favorite, as I said, my favorite scene, because it's so well done. And like we said, you were talking about blocking. I mean, Salieri dancing around the room whilst Tom Hulce just literally lays in his bed. It's hard to make that scene exciting, yet it was thrilling, you know? And I think the music played a massive role in that as well. I would play it, but we'll get taken off air, so I'll leave that bit cut out. But I did have it with somebody actually did it on YouTube. If you want to look this up, I'll put this in the chat. But it's Confitatus by Amadeus movie plus scrolling music score. Somebody literally lined up the music with it. Oh shoot, I just went off it. But somebody literally lined up the music with it, so it worked and it actually fit perfectly, word for word, like, and note for note. When they're singing it and when they're doing it, it literally lines up. So that's a pretty cool thing, and the geek in me really kind of went for that. I was kind of really excited about it. And that's everything that I've got, Sweeney. I mean, in terms of the thing, I got loads of really cool pictures of just Miloš at the end, just literally going through and just being like, yeah, look at this dude. Look how excited he is getting on set with all these characters, And that was the last thing I had, really, just showing Miloš Forman just in his best, because, yeah, I miss him. I miss his impact that he had on on cinema. I miss him, his films. They were my favorite things. I really, really enjoyed that. And if you haven't seen any of his other films, Ragtime's amazing, Hair's great, and obviously One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a masterpiece.
Yeah, well, no, Chris, you did an awesome job really digging into this movie, and hopefully for those that are watching this and have not seen it, this gives you a reason to now listen to this with all of this kind of in mind, or even to revisit this movie with some new things to really spend time on, because there's a lot to dissect with this movie. And I think hopefully this wasn't a really awesome first examination, and there's so many movies to discuss. And definitely, if you haven't done so already, please drop the movies you would like to see us talk about, for future ones. And something, Chris, I know that each one that we do leading up to the Oscars, we want to talk about a specific category and at least what our opinion is, and we would love to hear from everyone else. But let's start with the juiciest one, which is, of course, Best Picture winner. Who do you think it's going to be, or at least what are your thoughts?
Let me put up the Oscar noms, and we'll see who we've got, so then we can have a good discussion about it. Here they are. Here's the
guys, what do you think? Who should win Best Picture this year? Which movies?
Category.
And also, drops. Which movies
are we doing best? Are we doing Best Picture? Or are we doing Best Director?
Oh, we can pick whatever. I said Best Picture. Maybe Picture if you want to pull that up, but we could do Best Director too and pivot.
Let's do Best Picture first, and then if people are still with us after an hour and 45 minutes, we'll keep going, But yeah, I mean, these are the best pictures that have been nominated. There's 10, obviously, this year. So in order of as they are on the screen, we've got Bugonia, we've got F1, we've got Frankenstein, we've got Hamnet, we've got Marty Supreme, we've got One Battle After Another, we've got The Secret Agent, we've got Sentimental Value, we've got Sinners, and we've got Train Dreams. So, Sweeney, have you seen all of them, first of all?
The only one I haven't seen is The Secret Agent. That's the only one on this list I haven't seen. I loved all of them. I think F1 was maybe the one I wasn't expecting to get a nomination, but again, there is 10 films nominated. Not that I didn't like F1. I'm not sure that I think it deserves a Best Picture nom. I think the other ones are pretty logical considering what made an impact with audiences. If I had to choose one solely based on the way that it impacted me, I don't think it's going to win Best Picture, but I loved Hamnet. As time progressed, and this year was particularly awesome, and I don't know if everyone else felt the same when it came to just like movies this year. It's like One Battle After Another was awesome. There was movies that even came before that. I loved 28 Years Later. I thought that was really awesome, and I could look back through my watch list and what I got like marked off. But One Battle After Another, I was like, whoa, dude, this is it. This is the best picture. But then we slowly rolled through the year, and then we had movies like Sentimental Value, which I love. Joachim Trier. I did love Sentimental Value, not my favorite of his. I think Worst Person in the World was particularly a better movie. I also love some of his other movies. Thelma. I think Sentimental Value is a very personal and like amazing film. I don't think it deserves Best Picture. I think it deserved a nomination though.
Do you think that Skarsgård will win for Best Supporting Actor on that?
I think so. I think he killed it. I don't think that Elle Fanning should have gotten nominated, but that's just me.
The weird thing for me is that you've got Stellan Skarsgård for his role in Sentimental Value, and then you've also got, I think, Sean Penn for One Battle After the Other is the only one that comes close for me as Best Supporting Actor, because Sean Penn's amazing. Throughout that movie, he's probably, I'd say, alongside Leo, the best part of that movie for me. You know what I mean? I was saying that I really do like Benicio del Toro. So
Yeah.
we'll see. But yeah, sentimental value, Stellan Skarsgård is, he's definitely well up there for it. But I'm with you. I thought Hamnet was great. I loved it. I saw it with a Q&A with Chloe Zhao. She's quite an amazing, like, if you ever get the chance to, Sweeney, I mean, I know that she's had a lot of interviews done and stuff like this, but you ever get to see her do a talk in person? Yeah, she's like, her view of making films is beautiful. She talks about the community making the film. She talks about, like when they were making this film, she was saying about how people were losing family members. It was right after COVID, so there were people who'd lost family during COVID and stuff like that. And she just said, like, it was so very the community all came together to make this film, and grieve together and experience things, together as they were making the film. And obviously, the subject matter is incredibly sad and incredibly heartbreaking. But at the end of every shot, every scene that they shot, they would do a dance take and like have. The characters in the scene, they would put music on and they would have them do it in a lot more light-hearted way, because obviously having a kid die and, having like this heartbreaking themes, it's pretty cool that she got on dancing. I think they did, there's a video out there where they did Rihanna's We Found Love in a Hopeless Place, which is pretty cool. And they danced that one when they were in the Globe Theatre, which is cool. But yeah, Hamnet was, I thought that the costumes were great in Hamnet. The scenes are great.
Undeniably.
Mescal, I'm amazed that he didn't get a nomination, to be honest. And I'm sure we'll talk about acting next time, but Mescal was brilliant for me. I thought he was awesome. I mean, that bit when he's sitting on the stool backstage at, in that final scene, not contrast, but almost, complimenting Jessie Buckley, who's out in the crowd. It was mind-blowing. I thought he was absolutely stunning. But I mean, that's the way the Oscars go. Sometimes they throw you a spanner in the works.
Who do you think is going to win?
Best actor?
Or no, best picture, if you
Best
had to
picture?
get.
I think it'll go one battle after the other. After another, sorry. I mean, I love this movie. I got to write or submit taglines for this movie, which weren't used on the original poster, but they were used on a different thing. And I read some of the script before it came out, so I could get a handle on what the story was about, and I thought it'd be very interesting. These Christmas adventurers clubs and all this kind of stuff was, it was interesting to me. I didn't know how I was going to react to it when I saw it, and then I saw it in cinemas, and I was like, it's an all-timer. P.T. Anderson's done it again, and it's been so long since I've seen P.T. Like, when was the last one? Licorice Pizza in 2019. So it was like I was desperate for another sample of P.T., and then this one came along, and I mean, that chase scene at the end just took me. As I said, Sean Penn's character, when he's like from the get-go, I mean, first of all, from when he's in that internment camp, but then all the way through, he's just amazing. And his walk that he does, me and Ross have had talks about his walk. Ross said that, Ross, who's my friend, he said that it's meant to be Shane McMahon from WWE. I don't know. There's a guy that I work with who's an AD who's got a funny walk, who is friends with Sean Penn. It could be that. But it's an amazing walk that he does, and we see it right the way through to the end, which I think is brilliant. So one battle after another is definitely my sort of, I think that's going to win. And it's not really a hot tip. I think it's probably the favourite. Sinners does, but Sinners got so many nominations. I worry that it's going to be another one of those ones where they've given it tons of nominations. As I said, I don't know. This is just me speculating, but I wonder if they've given it tons of nominations and then it might not win as many as we hope it did, and that's sort of like the acknowledgement is the nominations. But Sinners was cool. It was a cool movie. I enjoyed the first half of it a lot more than the second half, but then again, I'm not a big vampire flick guy. And yeah, Michael B. Jordan was awesome in that, man. I mean, like, we can't look past his performance. It was awesome. Delroy Lindo as well. I mean, he's another one who could definitely give Stellan Skarsgård a Best Supporting Actor run for his money.
He did do a good job.
Dude, Delroy Lindo's great. He should have won for The Five Bloods. Like, he's an awesome, awesome actor. Like, I feel bad that I didn't recognize it as much as I did prior to Sinners. But I saw him in Sinners. I was like, oh my God, I forgot that Delroy Lindo was like an absolute epic actor,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the race is between the films that I feel like are going to likely, if they were going to win one battle, I think for sure, Sinners for sure, and then Marty Supreme would be the other one. I mean, Frankenstein could be close too, but again, I think that it's more likely between Sinners and one battle. I think are the two that are probably going to get the most votes.
Here's my question for you. Here's my question for you, Sweeney. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but here's my question for you, right? So Frankenstein, okay, out of all the ones I saw, and I'd say all but Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, and Train Dreams with the directors there in attendance. So I got to see all of these. Yorgos Lanthimos for Begonia, F1 with Joseph Kosinski, Frankenstein with Guillermo del Toro, Hamnet with Chloe Zhao, Mighty Supreme with Josh Safdie, One Battle After Another with P.T. Anderson. I saw all of them. Oh, yeah, and Sinners, Ryan Coogler doing a talk. So I saw all of them with the directors, and the directors talking about their process, okay? And out of all of them, the person who seemed to have his finger in absolutely every pie, every single element, I mean, I'm sure they all do, but the person who could literally speak to it and talk about the nuances of that they went into for costume, for hair and makeup, for lighting, for you name it, like literally production design, you name it, all of it was Guillermo del Toro. He could wax lyrically for hours, and I think he did. When we went, the film itself is 2 hours and 20 minutes. He was there another hour and 40 easy, going on for 2 hours and talking about the detail that went into Frankenstein and everything that he did and where it was coming from and how he controlled the script and how he controlled everything, even the marketing of it, every single element of it, you know. And if you watch the way that they did the making of that's on Netflix, it's spectacular. I'm amazed that after that he didn't get a nomination for Best Director. It shocks me that, because everybody's
pull up the Best Director noms. I don't think I saw who all got nominated, to be honest.
Let's take a look at that now. Yeah, I'm gonna fire it on. So there's the directing nominations. Now you can only have 5.
No, that's honestly pretty surprising considering how much everyone knows that this was like the film he wanted to make in his career, and how much has even been written about that and all of the stuff that's been released from Netflix to publicize the like level of curation that went into making this movie. That is surprising. But all of these are such good directors, and that's what's hard with like going. It's always been the case, right? When you have Best Pictures, which is typically more than 5, and then director. A lot of times these directors unfortunately get snubbed, and there's not one person here. I'll admit, Joachim Trier. Not that I don't think he doesn't deserve the Best Director nomination, but out of the 5, if I had to cut one potentially from this list, it would be him in favor of Guillermo del Toro. But even again, that dude is a master filmmaker, so like cutting him would also be sacrilege. But considering to the lengths that Guillermo del Toro went to make that movie, and yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. Like the stuff that they even made to just make it practical to shoot, like rocking the boat, like the hydraulics. Not that that's all him as a director, but having these visions of what needs to ultimately happening and enlisting a team to bring that to life. It's obviously more than just Guillermo del Toro himself. It's the crew that made it happen, the cinematographer, but starting from the script and the vision that he navigated to produce that film. It goes the same way with Josh Safdie and watching Marty Supreme. That is such a director-driven production. I mean, these are all director-driven productions, but in different ways. But to be able to like have all of that intricacy and that immediacy on screen in the way that Marty Supreme does, it takes a director that's able to juggle a lot of variables, right? Because these sequences are quick, they're snappy, there's something going on, you need to see this, there's a ton of layering, acting, lines that need to hit. That's a lot to juggle, where not that Sentimental Value is any easier, but that's a softer movie. There's more time to feel, there's a lot less variables, you know what I mean? It's interesting. And Ryan Coogler is obviously an amazing director as well. As early as Fruitvale Station, you saw his capability as a filmmaker, and each step he's proven that to be the case. In Sinners, which I'm really happy he made, is just a great example of him being a director when doing a film that's not just like Black Panther. Not that I don't like Black Panther, but we get to see him work within genre that's not a built-in IP in some capacity, or that's delivered by Marvel. This is him getting to have Ryan Coogler on a larger stage working in his own capacity. And I think that's really awesome. And one battle after another. I mean, Paul Thomas Anderson is like the American auteur. If there was
Yeah,
one, it's him. You know,
I
it's
agree.
not that there aren't others, but if you had to say who is the American auteur, it's that dude. I mean, that guy has completely reinvented cinema from the generation of filmmakers that are his contemporaries, like Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan. These people have redefined that Gen X 90s kind of cinema, Richard Linklater, you know, a lot of the directors that are really well known today.
I'm still blown away when you look at it that he didn't win for Phantom Thread, that he didn't win for There Will Be Blood. Like, I would have said, in terms of a directing performance, like, this is amazing. One Battle After the Other, I love it. But if I was to compare this film to those ones, to There Will Be Blood and to Phantom Thread, they're, for me, better. The better films. You know what I mean? I enjoyed There Will Be Blood I could put on right now. And the same with Amadeus. Like, I could watch it 20, 30 times. I think I've seen it like 8 times already, right? And the same for Phantom Thread. There's something about Phantom Thread I absolutely adore. You know what I mean? And One Battle After the Other, I've seen it now. I think I've seen it now 6 times, right? I went to the cinema to watch almost all of them. But I still think that the best P.T. Anderson was There Will Be Blood and then Phantom Thread. And then this comes third in terms of his filmography for me. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm surprised he didn't win for them. And I can't remember who was up against him at that time. But you know what I mean? Like, dude, even when we're talking about best directing, I was saying to you before, Miloš for Amadeus was up against, or was it Amadeus? It might have been One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But there was one year where it was literally, I think it might have been Amadeus because Jaws was neglected. Spielberg didn't get a nom, right? So check that one out for me, Sweeney. But Spielberg didn't get the nom for Jaws, and he was gutted. And there's a video of Spielberg literally like finding out the noms and being like gutted. But Miloš was up against like Fellini, and he was up against like some absolute Leviathan. I think even Kubrick, right? Some Leviathan directors, and he won for this. You know what I mean? So it's like when you look at it, you go,
I mean, Kubrick, never won a Best
Never won
Picture,
one.
which is insane. Even like, I was literally watching last night in bed. I was watching a trailer for 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I was literally just completely blown away. When you look at that movie, I have to find this trailer and I'm going to drop it in the chat. And some people had some really good comments that I want to speak to here in just one
Yeah.
moment.
While you're looking for it, look for Clockwork Orange as well, that trailer, because he used that with all of his outtakes, all of his cuts he put into the trailer. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Oh man, I messed this up. I'm gonna have to log back in. Oh no, I know what happened.
You've lost it. I'm gonna have to cover.
I completely botched it. Here, I'm going to speak to some of these really awesome comments here.
Do it.
And you can chat to this while I look for this. Cameron said he's been trying to make Frankenstein for 40 years, which was insane. He also thinks it was a really awesome choice to remove the movie monster iconography away from Frankenstein, which I also agree. I think his take on Frankenstein, even though it was like very sad boy Frankenstein, I also really liked it. You know, it had this really melancholic feel throughout the whole movie because really it is a tragedy more than it is even just a horror film, you know?
Here's the thing with this Frankenstein's monster that got me about him being like this super caring and all this kind of stuff, right? The Frankenstein, like the De Niro Frankenstein and the Frankenstein that's in the book, in the Mary Shelley book, he's a bit like Lenny from Of Mice and Men. He kills things because he doesn't know his own strength. You know what I mean? And he's like freakish strength. He's freakishly aggressive. You know what I mean? And it takes him time to work out why. The monster, the Jacob Elordi monster that Guillermo del Toro had put out, it was like he was a little bit kind of, for me, a little bit too innocent all the way through, and he was like a child and all this. Now, for some people, that's great. They love that. That's amazing. But I like, there's a lot more layers to a monster that accidentally kills or kills because it doesn't know any better. A little bit like, you know, when he puts his hand in the fire and he learns that that's what burns it. You know, that's the monster for me. That's Frankenstein's monster. He is left to learn these things alone because Frankenstein, as soon as he's created him, you know, leaves and isn't like a father figure to it, or isn't somebody who will teach it right from wrong. So I would have preferred the Jacob Elordi character to give more nuance, to be this character that was unable to know right from wrong from the beginning and had to learn what its strength was and why it was doing this. Like the old man in the forest, there could be that. I don't know. That's the element that I feel like was missing from this Frankenstein. And, although I love Guillermo, and you're right, Cameron, 40 years he spent trying to make this film. And he talked about how he would go to mass and then he would watch monster films, or he would read monster books, or he would, create monsters and craft them and make models and stuff like that. He said that when I was at the Q&A with him. And one of the coolest bits that he talked about was he said that not coolest, it was quite sad, but when he was talking about was he said that when his father was kidnapped in Mexico, I think it was by the cartels, he couldn't look at the sun. He found it difficult to kind of go outside and be in the sun. And that's what he tried to embody with the character, with the monster. Like, if you notice, he's wincing from the sun, and he has to be taught by Victor Frankenstein to embrace it. And at the end, when he's staring off into the horizon, he lifts his head up and then the sun hits it. And Guillermo said, that's what I was like when my father was returned from being kidnapped, and that was the thing. And I thought that was a really nice sort of element in there, what I mean? That looking out into the sun. And yeah.
Listen to this. Cameron just said this in the chat. He said, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was the first time for a film to win Best Picture Actor, Actress, Directing, and Writing since it happened one night 41 years earlier.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, like, one of the coolest things with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is nothing to do with the film-ish, but when Jack Nicholson won for The Shining, he accepted the Academy Award while he was on set of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They let cameras in, and they were literally filming them. Danny DeVito was there, Christopher Lee, right? And they, not Christopher Lee, Doc Brown. I've forgotten his name now. It's just lost me, right? But they were all there, like, around him whilst he was accepting the award. We wouldn't see that nowadays. We wouldn't see like this thing of, oh, this person can't be here because they're on set. All right, let's just cut to the set and see them filming it. You know what I mean? Even though I think that would be a great way to show the craft of filmmaking again at the Oscars. If we could show some of that, what I mean? If we could show stuff that's in production or is being made right now, there's stuff that pops up online all the time when people are going on, Universal Studios tour, and they're taking videos of, Jumanji and stuff like that, which is cool. And I think that they should be using that. They should be embracing that to help it sell the film, because some of the coolest parts of that film is the way that it's being made and the way they're shooting stunts and the way they're doing stuff like that. For me, it might give away a little bit of the film, but who cares? You're giving enough of it away when the trailer comes out and it has to be 3.5 minutes long, Show a little bit of the behind the scenes, show a little bit of the making of.
Yeah. 100%. Well, Chris, dude, this has been an awesome conversation, and I hope everybody that's tuning in, this is something, like I said, we want to try to do weekly, to speak to different movies. And Amadeus, this was Chris's film that even before this was a concept with the film Hang, that he just wanted to speak to. And I'm glad that this ended up being the vessel to do this. And I know that we have a lot of exciting films. And should we say the next film that we want to do, if we confirmed it being the next movie? I know it's my pick. I was honestly grappling. I'm a very big physical media guy, so I have a lot of Blu-rays, and I was like, here, what movie should I do for my first movie? And I'm just going to look.
Sitting thinking about it. He's been sitting thinking. I've told him which one I think it should be, because can I give a nice little intro to this? Sweeney and I, when we went out last time, when we hung out, we ended up back at his house, and like whenever I'm sort of waiting for my Uber or whatever, well, Sweeney will always throw a film on, right? And once he threw on Funny Games, right, which is
that movie like, we need to do. That should honestly, yeah.
Another time he put on Ad Astra, which was again another awesome film. And these two are two that we definitely need to make on a future episode, because
Ad Astra for sure, because that movie is my spirit child right now. Even though it's not a perfect movie, that film I watch like, I don't know, once a month at this point.
We should do thematic, right? I thought about this, right? We should do thematic, and that should be space and loneliness, because you could do Moon, which is the Sam Rockwell film, which I absolutely love. You could do First Man, which is Chazelle and Ryan Gosling's best film in my estimation, right? Besides Nice Guys, which I love. And then you could also do Ad Astra, and you could do a little bit
Event Horizon.
You could do Event Horizon. You could do 2001. Like,
Stellaris. You could do both Andrei Tarkovsky, Stellaris, and Soderbergh.
9-hour stream.
Yeah. Well, all right. All right. You were saying, what movie was it?
Sweeney
Yeah,
did
go
that, and the
for it.
last time that we hung out, Sweeney puts this movie on while we're sitting in his living room, which you can just see behind him, and we just chatted about the making of it, about the ramifications of it, about how cool it looked, about how cool it was shot, about how cool the director was, and it became like genuinely one of the coolest chats I've ever had with anybody in my life, and it was eyes wide shut.
Yeah. So that's definitely going to be the next one. No, that's a very controversial film, but I think Eyes Wide Shut is such a, if you haven't watched it, definitely watch it before we do this next episode. There's going to be a lot that we discuss that's very topical. It's a very adult film. So for those that watch it, I do want to give just an advisory of the themes. I don't want you just maybe go into this movie blind, but considering everything that's manifest in the last couple of years, what's been in the news, this film, without giving away too much, really is Kubrick's final masterpiece. Whether it was exactly how he intended it to be, there's a lot of controversy and kind of mystery around if this is really the final edit of the film, especially since we know it was doctored a little bit. But this is just, I think, a really good starting point. I've spent a lot of time studying this movie and breaking it down and doing research, and I'm going to try to do the same type of presentation that Chris did, just to be able to pull up some visuals. But that's going to be the next one we're going to release here coming up when we're going to do the next live stream. It might be this coming Sunday. So if you haven't, make sure to follow us at the Film Hang on Instagram. We're going to be trying to make this a more active thing, and obviously I'm going to be posting this in the community at Filmmakers Academy and keeping everyone involved. But I'm super excited for that next one.
Send us some stuff as well, like I said, we're doing Eyes Wide Shut.
Who wants to do Parasite?
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Like I did a look of Parasite last time when I was working at FA, and it's one of the coolest things that we made in terms of looking at the shapes and the lines that are there and looking at the way that they presented upper class and lower class. Yeah, I mean, it's such a cool thing. We want the Film Hang to be this. Everybody who is here now and people in the future, just come and hang out with us. Like, we're two very verbose people who like to talk a lot. Sometimes you'll disagree with what we say, in which case put it in the comments. That's cool. I don't mind being disagreed with. It's film, it's subjective. We could go to an art place and go and look at Starry Night by Van Gogh and both have a completely different take on it, and that's fine. Somebody could watch Jaws and see it as an allegory for something else. I don't mind that, and I love it. I love to talk to people about film, and sometimes we'll drop some really cool knowledge from people that we've worked with or people who've actually worked on these films. Like, I know people who've worked on certain films that me and Brendan have talked about that it gives some really cool insight. We want this to be a hangout for as many people who want to come and talk about film as possible. Because in the world right now, we're in America, there's an awful lot of crazy stuff going on. And, it's nice to be able to talk about something other than politics. It's nice to talk about film, and that's why we surround ourselves with it. And you guys are as important as we are in this community. We want to all talk and all be involved. Yeah. Send us your ideas. Send us your hot takes. Send us everything that you've got, and let's hang out.
Yeah, and make sure to follow us. I have our handles here at Chris Haigh Writer and at Bren Pancake, like the griddle item. Well, guys, I think this was awesome. Chris, awesome job with the info dump. I think this was a solid session 1 of the Film Hang. Y'all, we had a really good audience too. Thanks so much for spending the time with us. This was a really great 2 hours, and I honestly learned a lot, and I hope that everyone did. And thanks for keeping us honest, guys. I also saw some corrections and notes in there about facts and feeding that to the audience to make sure stuff's good, and this is what it needs to be. Appreciate that, Chris, and we'll see you guys on the next one where we talk about Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. All right, y'all. Catch you soon.